yeah, people have been asking me about these symbols, but they're just various alchemical symbols. I went on the internet, I looked for alchemical symbols, we picked the coolest ones. I do know what they mean, in particular, but not off the top of my head. It's alchemy is just all about transforming and recombining. And I feel like in my early Ice and Fire essays, I wrote the word transform like once a sentence. I was like, man, I have to find another word for this. Everyone's going through transformations constantly, but it really is that is kind of the deal. So there we are. Hey, Michael talks about stuff, aka Benjamin Stark. Let's let the people get a good look at you before I go make us smaller. Welcome. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm looking forward to this chat. Hopefully the people are as well.
This is going to be a Night Fort Iceberg stream. No, it is not. It is.
We're pretending we're starting at Harrenhal at least.
We will start with Harrenhal. We will work our way to the Night Fort. And in all seriousness, we are going to take apart. We'll start with the dream and like what happened in last episode, but we're looking more at the overall phenomena of what's going on with Alys Rivers, with Harrenhal, and with magic in general, because you can't really talk about any of this without very quickly getting to the question of, well, how does magic work anyway in this damn world? And what we're going to do, Michael, I thought we could do the first section spoiler-free, because we don't really need to get into sort of like what happened. Listen, you're pretty good about not spoiling people on your videos when possible, so I'm pretty sure you'll be on the same page. But then at a certain point, we'll give a spoiler warning, and we'll get into some very specific stuff about what Alys does. So at first, we'll just mention like her magic powers that are mentioned. We'll say, it says that she explodes somebody's head with a look or something. So, but we're not going to talk about what happens until a certain point. And we'll be very clear to warn us. So if you are a non-Fire and Blood watcher, you can enjoy the first part of this at least. And Michael talks about stuff. It's great to have you on, my friend. We look at the books in a very similar way. I discovered your channel when you were just starting, and you've got getting some momentum going. So if you have not subscribed to Michael Talks About Stuff and you watch my channel, definitely go subscribe. His videos are very entertaining. I just watched the Nettles Nan video. It's the theory about Old Nan being a child of the forest. Nettles also theorized to be a child of the forest, which we will talk about today, as well as the idea of women who are child of the forest archetypes in the story. And that video, if you have not watched his Nettles video, it takes a left turn. I don't want to spoil it, but about 2/3 of the way, he drops the extra like twist on the theory that's just, Michael, it's good.
It's what the people need. They needed something for that specific thing, and I like that little explanation there. But
I had never, I think I've turned skeptical in my old age. I've been here in the fandom for a while, and I'm kind of, no, it's not. They're not a Greenseer. They're not a Targaryen. They're this blah, blah, blah. I sound like an old grumpy man. You definitely loosened me up as far as the idea that maybe Old Nan could be Leaf in disguise. I think it's such an obvious idea that I just pushed it aside and was like, nah, she's Old Nan. She doesn't need to be anybody else but Old Nan. But you put together a convincing narrative. So this is but one of the tasty theories you can find on Michael's channel. We do look at the books in a similar way, and I really appreciate your creativity. Like, I found your channel and you've got all these theories. A lot of your best ones are about the Night Fort and the Wall, which of course very close to my heart. So we will be talking about the Night Fort today. Harrenhal is a symbolic parallel to the Night Fort in many ways. So we can learn a lot about the Night Fort and the others by looking at the stuff that goes on at Harrenhal. Aemond and Alys Rivers, a Night Queen, Night King, symbolic pairing. So we'll get into the symbolism. We are going to start with the dream and what's going on in Harrenhal, on House of the Dragon, and in general first. So I've got the outline here you can see below us. And so, let's talk about the dream. You did a video about Damon's dream, and I very much agreed with your analysis. You compared it to Jaime's Weirwood Stump dream.
Yeah. I think that that's the most straightforward comparison, like especially for someone who hasn't read all the books and they were like, "What's going on there?" I would say, go take a look at the dream that Jamie had when he slept with his head on a weirwood stump. And with the way that we see all of the roots growing through the entire castle, you got to assume that Damon isn't sleeping very far from a weirwood, no matter where he's sleeping in the castle. So it's basically the same mechanism for the dream happening, and then it's a similar sort of haunting vibe of the dream of like being haunted by the past actions, and specifically seeing someone who you want to look good to and someone who you want to like have a good reputation with and try to do right by. And for Damon, that's young Rhaenyra. And for Jamie, it was his former Kingsguard brothers who he never got to explain himself to.
Yeah, I picked up on the idea that they were similar, both being interpersonal dreams, but you put your finger on the idea that, like, yeah, Jamie had stuff he wanted to say to the Kingsguard he never got to say. And for Damon, he's got stuff that he keeps locked up inside him that he can't say for whatever reason. And part of it was the perspective shift. I think we probably both dove into what the actors have said about the scene, and Damon is talking about, and the director Geeta Patel. This was a moment, like maybe one of the first times that Damon actually slowed down and weighed the consequences of his actions. I talked about that in my Damon video a couple weeks ago. It was just he keeps moving because he can't stop and deal with the cognitive dissonance and deal with, the consequences of his rash actions and harsh judgments. And so this is what's happening in this dream. He's seeing young Rhaenyra, the child with the head, and apparently Matt Smith did a bunch of takes to try to get that perfect, horrified look.
He got it. He
Yeah.
did well. I just rewatched it a little bit before this year again, and you can tell how he is bothered by what he's seeing, and it's such a good like metaphorical way for him to do it, bringing back Millie Alcock and then having her be the one to deal with the consequences of Damon's current actions. I thought was really good. It's like that idealized version of Rhaenyra.
Yeah, the idolized version of Rhaenyra, and it sort of also hits on the idea that he's still locked up emotionally from these events from way back then. And you could see Rhaenyra calling him on that, like, do you still cling to what you think you lost? Like, are you still stuck on this shit from 20 years ago? Or are we dealing with what we're dealing with now? So
Yeah. I like how, or go ahead.
oh, just because someone's trying to give Damon therapy, it seems like.
Yeah. I like how Rhaenyra and Damon, when they had their argument, Damon calls it his brother's throne, and Rhaenyra gets mad at him, and it's like, I get where she's coming from, but it's been like 2 weeks, and he's called it his brother's throne for like 2 decades, however long it was. I get why he made the mistake, and then it's funny when he gets to Harrenhal, and he's been your grace for like an hour to these people, and the guy calls him your prince, and he gets mad about it. It's like the same mistake. It's like the title that you've had for the last 20 years, and now you mistake or misspeak, and Damon's getting mad about it. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, you get that promotion, you want the title. Titles,
Yeah.
after all.
Yep, exactly.
So we're going to talk about where's the dream coming from and all that stuff. But just on its own as a sort of interpersonal dream, it is very effective. In just a couple quick scenes with just a couple lines of dialogue, they've done such a good job of highlighting these issues with Damon and Rhaenyra that we get the weight of this scene. We get that he hasn't stopped. He was so flippant. He was so casual last week when we're talking about not only the fact that a child has been murdered that we didn't intend, but that this now Rhaenyra the Cruel and this whole thing has escalated and he's just smirking. So this was a good way to bring that back around and not just let him off the hook. There is a question to me, who is wanting to give Damon therapy and why? But we'll get there, I guess.
Yeah, that is an interesting question.
But yes, it is. Okay, so getting into the magical side of this, we know that Jaime Lannister, who is not... There are some theories about the Lannisters maybe coming from the Great Empire, the Dawn via Land the Clever. But for all intents and purposes, the Lannisters don't have the magic blood.
Yeah.
They're now, I guess if a Lannister skin changer turned up, I wouldn't be shocked because the old lions of Casterly Rock are mentioned by the Children of the Forest as magical animals like the dire wolves. So one imagines the original Casterly's skin changing lions is probably a thing that happened, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But we don't see any signs of that. We don't see that Jaime has magic powers. But when he lays his head on the weirwood stump and goes to sleep with a whole bunch of inner turmoil because he's just left Brienne behind, he has this dream that seems to be a mix of interpersonal stuff, but also signature magical elements. He's wielding a flaming sword down in a cave, and those Kingsguard are coated like others. They trail mist, and they're wraiths, and they don't make any sound when they walk, and it's one of the most clear Kingsguard as others symbolism passages. So we can easily see that there is this layer of, is Jaime meant to go and fight the others with Brienne? Are they going to wield magic swords against the others? Like, this makes sense. We saw it on the show. It made sense. I do think we'll see something like that in the books. So it's a combination, is the point, of interpersonal stuff, but also the weirwoods might be whispering to Jaime, like, there's a greater purpose. Flaming swords. Doesn't it feel good to hold one? Shout out to the Acolyte. Doesn't it feel good? Eyes up here. Eyes up here. You watching Acolyte?
No, I haven't. Oh. I haven't seen it, but
there's a funny scene that some people will get my joke, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it seems like a lot of what's going on could be the weirwoods playing on whether they know your interpersonal trauma or whether they're just like hitting that button and then it plays out as it will. It's sort of like Daenerys in the House of the Undying, where she drinks the potion and she's having visions that are like based on her important memories. It's like, does the House of the Undying know that Daenerys is thinking about a red door, or is it just tempting her with something that is in her mind subconsciously? So it's like, you question whether whoever's sending the dream to Damon wants him to have any specific therapy from it, or if they're just trying to freak him out. It's interesting to ask the question.
So this is a great thing to drill down on. So with the Undying dreams, what I believe the Undying are doing, and I've recently come to a resolution about this, they are using legitimate dreams of the future in order to ensnare people. So what they are showing people is not wrong. They're showing you, just as they say, things that happened, things that could happen. That's what what Dany sees Rhaegar and Elia talking about, all that stuff. I'm pretty sure that's a scene that happened. It looks like a scene that happened. Aerys on the throne, burn them all. We think that's something that happened. But what the Undying, their whole trick is they don't ever intend to let you out. So they are using legitimate visions of the future and from your mind, which would be the most compelling thing to get you engrossed. And so what happens at the climax of Dany's dream? She starts giving her magic and life to the vision of the slaves that she's shown. And the Undying are using that trick to pull that energy from her. So I think that they are showing her true visions, but it is for the intent of getting her engrossed so that they can then vampire her. Yeah. Would you essentially agree with that interpretation?
I think that it's either that is what's going on, or they actually are immortal beings who are at this point sick of their undeath, and essentially they are getting this girl to come in with her dragon to burn them on purpose. And then the reason they would be showing her visions of the future is because they know, hey, you have more to do. And then the reason they scare her is because they want Drogon to burn her. But like all the visions before she gets to the chamber, I think you're clearly right. That's what it's doing. Because I think that potentially everyone before Daenerys, their goal was, if you fall into our trap, you'll be ensnared here forever and we can take your energy. And Daenerys might be an exception to this rule. Or she clearly was, because she burned them alive. Whether that was intentional or not, I'm up in the air on. I could go either way.
I forgot that you had that theory, and guys, this is another cool. Michael talks about stuff, takes a look at something that everyone has a group think on, and comes up with a different spin, which is why I like your channel. Michael, you talked about the idea that the Undying might want freedom from their state of being, and that the burning actually does free them. They do sort of dance and raise their hands, and there's this interesting language about that. I think that is referring to like the whites that Dany eventually needs to burn, who will be freed. But I totally see what you're talking about and think that's an interesting spin. I need to go back and think about that more. But essentially, the visions that they are showing Dany appear to be legit. And obviously the shapes of the future, we don't, it's a possible future, but it's not stuff they made up. So with the weirwood dream that Jaime has, the question is, and you raised it, is it just that the weirwood is psychically active? And so when you put your hand on, or your head on it, or your whatever, your deepest stuff comes up, and you yourself are able to glimpse shapes of your own future? Or is it Bloodraven / the weirwood net godhood sending Jaime the vision so that he can work on his trauma and start to get the idea that he should wield a flaming sword, and to prepare him for it makes sense that this is all directed, but it also makes sense that it could just be happening. What's your take on that?
So I would say that at the very least, a portion of the weirwood dreams that we see throughout the story are directed. Whether or not that means they all are, I don't know, right? Like, you can imagine if it's essentially like a magical drug trip. If you were a wizard who could send visions via a drug trip, people might still go trip on that without you sending them a vision. And the more powerful those dreams are, probably the more effective your visions you send will be, because people will take those things seriously. So I kind of have like that view of it, where like certain dreams for sure are being sent by someone like Bloodraven, who is using the weirwoods. Other ones could be random noise. I don't know.
So a good clue about this would be John's Azor Ahai dream, because it's the same thing. It's interpersonal stuff, his guilt about Ygritte and stuff, but also the flaming sword, the battle against, like, he's fighting wildlings, which is his trauma, but it's turning into the fight against the whites, which is his future. So you could ask the same question. Is this just his future starting to come to him because he's a warg and a psychic? Or is it Bloodraven? Oh, but then there's a hand on John's shoulders waking him up when he's like starting to go crazy. And so that's probably Bloodraven's hand, which means he's tampering. And we think that Quaithe is tampering with the glass candles because Marwyn spells out that that's what they're for. And Quaithe is straight up saying, I'm giving you this waking dream. And then the one time Dany has the dream of burning, melting Robert's forces, which are like others. Quaithe is in the room when she wakes up. So it's like, well, probably she was messing with that dream there. So I think it's probably, when you look at Jaime's dream, it's probably more likely that it is directed, simply because John has a flaming sword dream too. And I think that multiple people are going to have to wield at least Valyrian swords, if not outright flaming swords against the others. I think that is coming. And so it makes sense. It fits both, though. I mean, if it's a future that's coming, then it could be something you're just seeing. But when we go to Harrenhal, Alys Rivers is standing right there. So this one feels pretty well directed, or at least that's the implication. Whether it's coming directly from Alys Rivers, or if she's just like aware of it, like, and it's the whatever weirwood hive mind consciousness is sending it, that's talking to her as well. It's interesting because, like, I don't know if I read it as coming from her. I think I lean towards it comes from the weirwood, because that's what he's staring into the face of when he wakes up. But I think she's aware on some level or another. Either if she's aware of what he's seeing specifically, or she's aware, hey, we're gonna rattle him a little bit. You be standing behind him and tell him he's gonna die. So the again, to go the interviews that Geeta Patel and Alice or the actress that plays Alice, Gail Rankin, have given, they make it sound like Alice is trying to get inside Damon's head and is using they talked about using his trauma to get inside him and control him and stuff. So, I would be proposing that she would be tampering with his dreams through some of the magic that exists in Harrenhal. And I want to talk about all the different magics that are there. But yeah, we're going to talk about the idea that she's just doing it, or using the weirwood, or using the stones, or using various other things. So I'm saying, like, when we're talking about, is there anyone tampering with Damon's dream? Well, we do have a suspect. She is right there. So she is either watching and just having fun, or maybe she is, she could. Somebody in our chat suggested that he sleepwalked out to the tree and touched it and had this whole dream and then woke up. And it doesn't show him touching it, but maybe he was and he let go or something, you know.
I kind of read it as he's walking out of his room and into the room with young Rhaenyra, he's actually sleepwalking out of his room and to the weirwood instead. I think that's how I took it, because then he's staring at Rhaenyra, but he wakes up and he's staring at the weirwood. So
I think that makes sense, yeah. And of course, obviously, it's meant to be mysterious, but something along those lines. So yeah, that is what we want to get into, is what are the possible combinations of origins, if you will, and not just this dream, but future dreams. This Damon's going to be here for a hot second. They're clearly setting up some future stuff. We've seen previews of the next one. There's going to be more interaction. Alys is just getting started, folks. So
yeah, that's one of the things that's the most exciting, because it's like I had to talk about Harrenhal in a video right away, but it's like, oh, we're staying here for a minute. There's going to be a bunch more lore dropped. That's going to be a lot of fun. So
yeah, we do. And this is one of the things that is a little different with the first show. They embrace some of the magic, other elements they distance themselves from, and they told us with Hot Dragon they were going to go for the Harrenhal spooky castle vibe. So they definitely did. It's a lot of fun. They delivered. Like, we're past the initial reaction to it, but yes, like, it was awesome. I love the way that it was shot, with Damon very small in the corner coming down the stairs, and you could see.
Yeah.
And they said they were going for the kind of thing where from scene to scene you weren't sure if he's going up or down, or what room connects to what room. It's supposed to be disorienting for both us and Damon. And there's some really cool stuff on the behind the scenes actually on this episode about Matt Smith having fun getting wet and just like really going nuts.
So I didn't watch the whole behind the scenes thing. I saw some of the clips from it. Did they say anything about the Isle of Faces? Like, I know when Damon flies in, the first shot we get with Harrenhal in it, the Isle of Faces is there, and then Harrenhal's on the other side, and they're kind of like mirrored to each other.
They did not. They mentioned that Damon is. So I made a joke in my video about Damon having this argument with Rhaenyra and then peeling out in his Trans Am. You look like a guy that knows what a Trans Am is.
Not a big car guy, but I've heard of them.
It's a sports car. I don't mean to stereotype you. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Go ahead.
The Trans Am is a sports car. And I made the joke. I was like, it's the stereotypical one from a lot of 80s movies. So when the boyfriend or the toxic boyfriend like peels out in the car and like hits the bottle, like it's a Trans Am or a Camaro.
Okay.
So I said Caraxes is his Trans Am. He's peeling out in the Trans Am. He's like, peace, I'm not sticking around to take accountability. And then in the behind the scenes, they talked about Damon being like driving on the highway drunk at night, like going into Harrenhal in the rain. And they shot it a little drunkenly. So we're definitely supposed to get that vibe of Damon like speeding around at night, pissed off, like hitting the bottle. Like I somehow nailed that exactly.
That is funny. Yeah. Harrenhal is his version of like a cheap motel to spend the night at. He's just pulling in, just like walking through like the leaky roof. He's just like, all right, give me a bed. I'm taking over.
Yeah. Drinking and riding. That's it. And I mean, Matt Smith exudes that energy anyway, so.
Yeah.
So the one thing about the dream, like we said, it's all interpersonal, but Alys does tell his future when he comes out of it, because she says, oh, you'll die in this place. So we're not to the spoiler section yet to discuss in what ways that could be true or not, but just want to dwell on the fact that she's telling his future. because the other dreams that we highlighted were a combination of interpersonal and future stuff. And here, the future stuff comes after the dream, which reminds me of Quaithe. It reminds me of Quaithe messing with Dany's dream and then being there when she wakes up to put a little extra exclamation point on the message. So,
Yeah. I wonder if we're going to get more dream sequences as they spend more nights in Harrenhal. I wonder if, like, we're going to get that second half and there's going to be some futuristic stuff, like, in a future scene.
I have to feel like it's just getting warmed up, yeah. So let me go back and hit a couple of new squishers. Thank you, guys. Can't stick around today. Wanted to show support. Thank you, Val. Handsome and intelligent men. Oh, we try. Tim's not around, but I scrounged up another one from the Song of Ice and Fire verse. So
Yep.
let's see here. And yes, if you guys want to send in a question and get our attention immediately, you can do that with the Super Chat function or the PayPal function, which is why my phone is beeping. Let's see. No, it's one of my friends saying you do look like a Trans Am guy. Backing me up. It's just that you're young. You're young. So
That's probably it.
Not
I
nearly as
like
old
when
as
you
me.
said Trans Am, I've heard that talked about a bunch before, but I didn't have like a picture in my head of what it looks like. You know what I mean?
Your uncle had one. Okay, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
One of your uncles, maybe all of them. So, mine too. I think my dad had the Camaro. Anyways, no, Laguna. He had a Chevy Laguna. That's what it was.
Okay.
Which is like the more off the beaten path version of that car. Oh God.
Okay.
I tried to point the finger at you and it just went. It just went.
Yeah.
All right, so magical factors at play. We've got a few candidates here. We've got the stones. We have the Isle of Faces / the weirwoods. And the weirwoods,
Yep.
me and Michael agree that inside the Planetos is just a ball of weirwood roots. There's no magma core. It's just roots. It's the beating heart of the planet. They're all connected.
Yep. Probably. Yep.
I mean,
it's the most likely. It's the most reasonable thing. Like that. It's a big network that goes very, very deep, and also apparently reaches to the tallest towers if it can. So.
They are everywhere. And this is one thing I do love about it. And I saw you get excited about this too. The way that they've got the roots going up into the castle, not just a little bit. They're everywhere. They're climbing up into the towers. They are literally eating the castle and trying to take it back. This is what they would do. I very much approve of this.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think it's great. I think there's a lot to like get to the bottom of, like, do we think that it is all roots from that Godswood weirwood, or is there room for something where, like, if you burn a weirwood beam that's been cut down, does it have a chance of like igniting some portion of it to reroot? Like, are the beams inside the walls taking root because of all the blood or the fire or the water? Like, we don't know, but there's interesting implications, right?
So I hadn't thought of that. Was one thing you mentioned that I hadn't. The idea that there could have been some weirwood in Harrenhal that didn't get burned. Most of it would have been burned, but maybe somewhere deep in the castle there are some rafters that didn't, and maybe it starts regrowing. We have not seen that happen, but it would not surprise me if that could happen, especially if there is live weirwood. For the most part, though, as we both talked about in many videos, it is a mushroom-like organism. At the very least, if not a straight-up fungal organism. Most of the weirwood exists underground. The things that pop up above the ground are comparable to mushroom caps, with most of the organism being on, underground. And that is why they look like Amanitas mushrooms. I mean, it's really not that cryptic. The mushrooms are growing on Bloodraven's cheeks. Yeah. So basically, is it the one in the Godswood? I would say that's like almost, a better way to frame it is, how big is the weirwood organism under Harrenhal?
Yeah.
It's probably connected to the Isle of Faces. And I think on the show, they've got the tree reaching out to the Isle of Faces, and they're showing us the Isle of Faces. I think we're supposed to understand that the Isle of Faces is working on the castle. It is
that
cleansing,
makes sense.
reclaiming,
Yeah.
drinking.
That makes sense to me. Yep, exactly. It is upset about the castle's existence and making sure that there's enough blood being fed constantly to those trees.
Yeah, so Harrenhal's curse. There's it's in a general sense, many atrocities have happened. And it seems that ghost hauntings are kind of a thing, both like from the fact that there's a lot of places that are said to be haunted credibly, and the fact that Barrack and Stoneheart both act like classic ghost stories. It's the last thing they were doing when they died that they're fixated on, and they're just trying to like finish that purpose. So it comes across very ghost story like. So there's general atrocities all over Harrenhal, but it specifically said that Harren cut down groves of weirwood trees and mortared the stones with blood. And then later, when Alys Rivers has come into power at Harrenhal, it is said she's awoken the power in the stones. So what do you think? Is there something with... Now, it's not oily black stone. It's just black stone. It could be basalt or something. Who knows? But, like, is it now magical because there is blood and human sacrifice that's been given to the stone? Is there magical mana that someone like Alys Rivers could potentially draw from, do you think?
I would think so. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's similar to how it what seems to be the most likely way Valyrian steel was created. Like there was some human sacrifice element there that put the magic into it. So if you're sacrificing people and using their blood to work the stone, it would make a lot of sense that you're also working magic into your stone. Uh, at least, as far as everything that we've seen about how sacrificial magic seems to work. Like, that's what I would do if I was trying to get some magical stone for my castle.
So do you think Harren was doing some of this stuff on purpose to harness magic power? Was he something of a sorcerer?
Yeah. So I'm, like, this is just since seeing the episode recently and really thinking about it, I'm starting now to lean more towards the idea of Harren uncovering some sort of ancient lost knowledge, potentially both on the ice and fire side. Because obviously I think there are weirwoods in the wall. And that is what creates the magical ward. And Winterfell and Storm's End are also described as having very thick walls, and Storm's End, at least we know for sure, has a magical ward.
Oh, I think
Melisandre
they're all warded like all the old castles are probably warded like Winterfell and Stone's End. Yeah.
Right, and so if that ward is created by weirwoods inside the walls on some level or another, I think that could be something that Harren the Black would have uncovered, and he might be a look at like what people would think of someone doing all of this blood magic to create a modern day Winterfell or a Storm's End, and everyone's like, oh my god, this is terrible, because they remembered how many people had to be sacrificed for all of this blood magic. So if he's building weirwoods into his wall, and that's an effective ancient magical technique from, say, Bran the Builder, well, he could also be doing whatever the Valyrians did to get their magical stone if they were doing human sacrifice over there. Well, if he's mortaring the stone with blood, maybe he's doing some Valyrian magic and some old gods weirwoody magic, and he's just like, yep, I'm throwing it all at the wall. I've heard about the others. I've seen something in a dream. I want a magical warded castle. And the interesting thing, because I was watching your Harrenhal video in preparation for this, and you talked about how Aegon, when he came to Harrenhal, didn't just fly in. He flew so high up in the sky that they couldn't see him, and then came down already within the walls. So if there's a big magical ward similar to the wall, which dragons wouldn't cross, I wonder if, the day Harren finished that, the ward was put in place. So Aegon flew all the way up over its height limit and then straight down for a reason. And if that was to tell us hey, Harren the Black's outer ward worked, and I got around it because I know more about magic than he does, but it might have worked. Harren the Black
maybe that's why he was so bloody confident.
Yeah, he might have had the magic right and had created a ward, because otherwise, why did George describe Aegon coming down that way already inside the walls? Maybe he did that for a reason.
You're coming with the big bat here early on. This is great.
Yeah.
So I have not thought about this enough until recently. The idea that Harren could be doing some of this intentionally. But what I want to draw attention to from what you just said is the idea of magicians using magic in a hostile way. Okay, so we're used to thinking Bran uses the weirwood magic because he's a Greenseer and he can harmonize with the tree and use the magic.
Yeah.
But think also about people like Euron. Euron uses magic, but not in a collaborative way. And he enslaves magicians and takes their power. And my whole thing about Azor Ahai and the Weirwood Net is like that. It's Azor Ahai invading the Weirwood Net, taking its power, corrupting the weirwood trees, twisting it so that he can use it. It's a Euron type of use. So that's what we're talking about with Black Harren. This is a good insight, Michael. This would explain why he cuts down a lot of weirwoods but still leaves a godswood, which is one of the biggest questions. Like, why does he have a godswood if he's cutting down all the weirwoods?
Yeah, it might be because living weirwoods are like an important part of, like, you know, if it's like you have weirwoods in a big circle, you might need some of them to still be alive for that like magical ward to kick in. And I'm honestly not super convinced he wouldn't have like some still living weirwoods built into his walls somehow or another. But, you know, that's just speculation on my part.
It's possible. What I think we should think about, that's possible, definitely. What I think we should think about is him knowing that Weirwood has power and thinking that, well, if I cut it down, I can get a certain use out of it. You know, by cutting it down and building it into the rafters, it would be creating wards. That's exactly what it would be doing. And I like the idea that Harren is looking up what the original First Men did with their castles, which would have been built around the Godswoods, around the underground caves, which are there first. And that's why they say at Winterfell, the crypts were there first. The castle's built around the crypts, which means it's built around the Godswoods. The weirwoods are eternal. So, of course, the castles, you know, the weirwoods, there's all kinds of reasons to build castles around weirwoods. Probably that's a little off topic to get into this early in the stream, I guess. But
yeah.
I like this. I think most of my viewers are familiar with this, though. So the idea that Harren is trying to emulate a First Man castle, that makes a lot of sense. I'm almost embarrassed I didn't think of that. Good job, Michael.
Thank you.
The chat is impressed as well. That makes a lot of sense. Because he's doing too much. If he's just bumbling around with no idea about what he's... Like, why did he build it on the shore of the God's Eye?
Right. Yep. He's like... Yeah, he wanted to be an old Westerosi king, the way that they all had been, you know, before the dragons got there. That's fully what he expected. So, of course, he needs a giant warded castle with weirwoods in the walls and some blood magic wards, because that's what everybody else has. Winterfell, Storm's End. Who knows about, you know, is Casterly Rock warded? We don't know. We haven't seen that, but probably. Like, they probably did something over the thousands of years if they could, so...
So I got a super chat I want to address real quick.
Yeah.
So weirwood can be petrified, as seen in Naga's ribs. Oily black stone is petrified, shade of the evening tree. That is Crowfoot's daughter's theory. So just to address this real quick, we have different theories that are similar. I think it is oily stone that is the original poisoner, and that the shade trees, which have all the same descriptions as the oily stone, especially the drink. It's oily and the colors are the same, blah, 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 blah. I think it's the oily stone that's creating the shade trees. Amanda thinks, that Crowfoot's daughter from Disputed Lands, thinks it's the other way around, that if the shade trees petrify, it turns into oily stone. I like her theory a lot. I like my theory a lot, too. So I think they're both potentially... Because she's pointed out, if you look on the map, Ulthos looks like a giant shade of the evening forest. It's like a purple forest. So maybe that's nothing. But like my whole theory about Ashai, which is all, you know, the whole city is built out of oily stone, is that it would have been built out of something more normal. A meteor fell in the Shadowlands. Everything is toxic and poisoned in the whole Shadowlands. And so the oily stone has been created. And that's why it's all oily. And so when she first said, okay, no, it's petrified wood, I'm like, well, where are they going to get that much petrified wood? And she's like, well, there's a big forest of it right there.
Yeah,
That's like, okay, that's, you know. So
fair
check out the
point.
Disputed Lands if you want that theory. They're definitely connected. And the
Yeah,
weirwoods and the moon meteors ultimately ended up being connected when I followed the symbolism. Like, I'm talking
yeah,
about maybe there's a meteor in the heart of winter that's creating some of the weird others' magic and driving their magic. Maybe there's one on the Isle of Faces. Azor High might be the Bloodstone Emperor. He worshipped the black meteor, and then he's creating the others, or somebody connected to him is doing that. So I do think we are going to see like a coherent meeting up of the meteor and the trees. And
I agree. Yeah, I think that there's a decent chance that because so this is something that I'm not super familiar with. I looked a lot into Elden Ring and Elden Ring lore at one point for my channel. So maybe someone in the chat can correct me, but as far as I'm aware, in Elden Ring, there was another moon in the sky at one point that was shattered, similar to the legend in Westeros about the moon shattering, and it crashed down to Earth. And there are like I think it's like Noxtella, the city might be called, but it's a city that is supposedly built of like these like creepy old magical stones that are the remnants of a fallen moon, if I have my Elden Ring lore correctly. So that's like exactly what we're talking about here, where it's like if this oily black stone was that first moon that used to be part of like that giant magical system, that would make a lot of sense to me. Sort of like the weirwood trees might be a corrupted weirwood, the oily black stone might be a corrupted moon that at some point someone tried to do magic with and broke the natural order of things.
amen. Amen. Been
Yep.
talking about this stuff for a long time. In fact,
Yep.
Michael, about 2 years ago, before House of the Dragon came along, I was starting to get a little bit burnt out on Ice and Fire, and I was kind of like, man, what should I cover? And I started to hear about all this Elden Ring shit. And
Yeah.
people were getting hold of me like, dude, it lines up with your theories, you know. And like you, and
Yeah.
I watched your Elden Ring videos, which I recommend if you want to get started on some of those correlations. I was about to charge into it. My friends sent me a PS5. I was going to start playing it, but
Yeah.
obviously it's a really hard game. And then House of the Dragon
Yeah.
came out like a week later. The news came out, and so I shifted. I was like, okay, I'll cover this.
Yeah.
There's a lot in the Elden Ring. As you
Yeah.
highlighted in your videos, what George did is he designed the world building of the ancient world, not the current
Mhm.
storyline gameplay. And so it's all the stuff that that we like to make theories about, you know, the magical workings of the
Yeah.
universe. So if you're familiar with any of that deep magic from Ice and Fire, then it's easier to see those correlations. But in particular, there is some crazy stuff. Like if you just heard what he said, there's a city built out of a piece of fallen moon. Like, guys,
Yeah.
does this
Yeah.
sound familiar?
It's there's an ancient order that like it runs the world essentially via some magical like I don't know if it's a social contract, but it's essentially a giant magical social contract that all funnels through this giant magical world tree. And one of the endings of the game, you can literally like replace the age of the Erd tree with the age of the moon. So it's like it's all there. It's like a weird dynamic between the two, which I think is kind of going on in Ice and Fire as well.
So we need to. This is what I was thinking of. I was watching your second Elden Ring Ice and Fire video this morning, and I was like, we need to think about the end of the game to see if we can get any clues about how to fix the Weirwood net or how to fix the moon situation.
Yeah, so essentially, as far as I'm aware, Ronnie the Witch is one of the ones that seems like her ending is the most ice and fiery to me, or like one of them, I should say. And apparently, what she does is fixes the corrupted world tree by like replacing its magic. And it turns out that by doing that, she lifts like this veil that had been covering a darkened second moon. Because apparently there's a moon that crashed down. There's a moon that's hidden by like a shadow. That I think was hidden when the tree consciousness took over. And then when you remove the tree consciousness, you can see the second moon again. and she says, now we're under the age of the moon.
Okay.
So I don't know. It could be like a yin and yang thing between the tree and the moon is the kind of vibes I got, where it's like one will grow powerful as the other fades away, then the other will come into power as this one fades away, and it could go back and forth, but I don't know. I don't know enough about Elden Ring lore to know if that holds up, but that was the vibe I got.
Well, yeah, so okay, so there's a couple of things that I've dead-ended to, right? So, if the long night is created by meteor impacts, and obviously it's all got magic on top of it, but the core idea is meteor impacts, clouds the sky, covers the sun, everything goes dark.
Yeah.
How do we fix that? The answer is wind. Like, we need to literally blow all this stuff out of the air. So it's like, is that how this ends? Like, the winds of winter, like, I thought of what's his name, Robert Jordan, how he begins all of his novels with the wind blowing over the land and stuff. Have you ever read any of the Wheel of Time?
I haven't. No. Is that he?
It's a very famous narrative device that he uses, but yeah, it's kind of nonsensical because we haven't used any aeromancy really in the story.
Yeah.
So it's like, what is Bran just gonna? And that's.
Yeah, I wonder. Well, so like there is that thing about how the language of the old gods is the wind in the trees. Like maybe they have control of the wind.
It's there.
Yeah.
There's a way to do it. And it could be the kind of thing where we don't necessarily have everything spelled out for us. We just see what's happening and we're supposed to figure it out. Hammer of the Airs. Yeah. And then the other idea is like, okay, well, it seems like the moons were ice and fire because all the moon maidens, the women that parallel the moons, they seem to either be ice or fire, or they transform sometimes. Because one of the fire moon meteors gets lodged in the ice moon, I think. I don't know. And so it's like, well, how do we fix this problem if our fire moon got broken and it's now the pieces of its burnt corpse are strewn about the planet? What do we do about that?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Do we need to eject the oily stone from the planet? Like that's not a coherent answer.
There's the scene in Avatar where, have you seen Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Only a few episodes.
Okay. Well, in the anime, especially, there's like a meme line. Because Sokka's girlfriend is this ice princess who turns into the moon because a little bit of the moon's life force was inside of her. She was able to be sacrificed to replace the moon in the sky when the moon spirit was killed. So there's this meme line where he's like, my girlfriend turned into the moon, and this guy looks at him, he goes, that's rough, buddy. It's just like, basically, though, like, I do kind of wonder if you could find, like, if the moon has some sort of life force behind it, and if the weirwood trees have some sort of life force behind it, like, I wonder if you could take a fraction of that, and in the end there might be some magical sacrifice that could restore the second moon or birth a new world tree, basically.
Well, one of the ideas that people have thrown at me that's like a counter idea is like, maybe there's a piece of it still out there. Maybe it's black and it's invisible and it's out there. The dark
That's what
sister.
it is in Elden Ring. That's exactly what it apparently is in Elden Ring, is it's hidden by darkness and it returns.
So we could see something like that. Also in the Hanna-Barbera cartoon Thundar. Are you familiar with the Thundar?
I've seen it as like a little child, but I didn't watch. Like, I don't know details of it.
Have you heard me talk about it?
I don't think I've heard your take on it.
So if you remember the intro, there's a comet, a red comet that messes up the moon. But it's not a comet, it's a runaway planet.
Okay.
And it streaks between the Earth and the moon, and you see it cracks the moon, and the planet gets messed up. And so it plunges the Earth back into the age of swords and sorcery. And in Thundar, you can see the cracked moon up in the sky in some scenes. They paint it up there.
Okay.
And then Thundar pulls out the sun's sword, which is a white glowing sword that looks just like dawn would if it glowed. So it's very obvious that George cribbed a couple ideas from Thundar. And the thing I want to refer to is that the red comet is a runaway planet. And so, what if the red comet is in fact the remnant of this moon? And that's why when it comes back around, it triggers the rebirth of dragons, Azor Ahai's birth
Yeah.
and stuff. So maybe the comet's going to come back and get pulled into orbit.
That's I've definitely I'm almost positive I've heard you talk about that in the past, the comet being a remnant of that original moon, and I really like that. Because as you said, it is the thing that sort of rebirths dragons. The legend is when the original moon broke, dragons were born from it. Um, One of the things that I kind of like is the idea of like how the old gods and the Westerosi think you go into the weirwoods when you die. Um, and so if the old Valyrians were worshiping the moon and they were storing their dead in this moon when they died, and then that moon is destroyed, potentially, and it's a giant magical sacrifice to create dragons with the souls of the dead that were stored in that moon. And then when a piece of that moon comes by, that's why it would have dragon souls that it could dispense into Daenerys's egg. But that's a lot of speculation. But
I think because the weirwood and the moon are such strong parallels for each other, I think that it's the weirwood that's storing souls. But the thing is,
yeah,
now
it could
that
be
you
a yin
mention
and
it,
yang.
all the old religions do talk about going up to the stars, like the Dothraki, the Great Empire of the Dawn.
Yeah,
They're rejoining their star ancestors and stuff.
yeah.
So there could be something to that.
I think it could be a bit of an ice and fire parallel where like the weirwood is the icy storage of souls, the moon was the fiery one, but then that was destroyed for some blood magic sacrifice. So the dragons could be built with those souls.
So I think that it's easy to conclude, to get back to the outline, that stones can
Yeah.
hold magic power, be they
Yes.
comets or just whatever the oily black stone is. The oily black stone is magical. Bloodstone Emperor worships a black meteor. It's implied to be magical. The Dawn meteorite implied to be magical. So yes, we see the stone castles are warded. The wards are magic. Presumably they're affixed to the stones. We see glamours attached to gemstones, which are stones.
Yeah.
Obsidian is a
Yep.
kind of rock. It's used for sorcery as well. So I think this is solid. Harrenhal's stones, originally mortared with blood, and then burnt in dragon fire. And this is the next thing I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Fused stone is created with dragon fire and sorcery. Presumably, the dragons are melting it to a molten state, and then somehow the Valyrian sorcerers, I suspect with aeromancy, are shaping the molten rock and then flash hardening it, and then you get these fanciful shapes and things.
Yeah.
So, oily black stone, we don't know exactly how it's made or what it is. We've been talking about maybe it's meteorite, maybe it's earth rock that got burnt by the meteorite, but it's definitely possible that there is blood magic involved in the creation of the oily stone, or perhaps just in the calling down of the meteor. But the thing I want to focus in on is the word bloodstone. Okay, the comets and meteors are called bleeding stars, and then when it falls down to Earth, George is calling it a bloodstone. So I don't think he's talking necessarily about actual bloodstone. He's talking about this rock in a magical way. It's a bleeding star stone. Okay,
Yeah,
so what
that
I'm
makes
wondering, I think I've explained this in an ass backwards way. What I'm wondering is if at Harrenhal we have accidentally created oily black stone, essentially, because it has blood and then it has the dragon fire. And it wasn't intentionally created into fused stone or shaped or anything,
Yeah.
but just having those two raw elements here. Like dragon fire is used to make Valyrian steel. So presumably there's something special about dragon fire that's different from just very hot fire that imbues Valyrian steel with its qualities. So I think I just talked myself into it. Yeah, dragon fire is
Yeah.
magical and may have imbued the stones with more magic. So maybe we created something accidentally at Harrenhal that Aegon wasn't even planning on making.
Yeah, that I mean that would track to me, and it also like if this stuff is a product of hitting stone with dragon fire and potentially having blood seeped in there, it would make sense that they would have accidentally invented it way back in the day as well. And then they're like, oh, hey, magic stone as a natural result of us conquering our enemies. Cool. Let's do something with that.
Yeah, or like something related to it, because I think the way that George
Yeah.
builds his magic is that he should, like the R'hllorys don't have a monopoly on fire magic. The Valerians used fire magic too. Alys Rivers may have seen the future in a campfire as well. Woods witches are practicing all different kinds of magic. The R'hllorys are just people who made an order around fire magic. And so magic is wild at its heart. And George shows us people using it in a more organized and a less organized fashion. So I think when you think about magic that way, then it's like they're just principles that can be used. Right. So if dragon fire has sorcerous properties and if blood contains magical mana, then yeah, we've got both of those things soaked into Harrenhal's stones. So when it says that Alys awakened power in the stone, it could be a specific power, or it could just be magical mana, like I said, to draw from.
There's also a thing that like isn't talked about much in the books, but it's also kind of implied that there are other old gods besides the trees, and the stones are one of those. I think like Catelyn Stark at one point thinks something along the lines of like the first men kept the nameless gods of the forest, stones, and rivers, or something like. And Leaf for sure says, when asked, where are all the rest of you? To say that they're dead, she said, gone down into the stones and into the trees. So, like, there's a few different times where it's somewhat implied.
Oh, no. We're going to talk. We're going to go. No. We're going to the Rainwood, Michael. What do you make about the stone faces down in the cave in the Arion Winds of Winter chapter in the Rainwood? It's hundreds of feet underground. They are stalactites and stalagmites, which are joined together to create those columns. There's a special word for it. I don't know what it is. And the children of the forest have carved their traditional faces into those pillars and into the stone wall. What is that?
Yeah. I think that the old gods might also be in the stone, and that there could be stones that are just as magical as these trees if more people worshiped them and fed them blood. But I don't know. That's kind of just the vibes I get, right? Like, the modern day old gods all worship these weirwood trees. If they had all started worshiping the stones 10,000 years ago instead, would we see magical stones with faces doing blood magic? I don't know.
So it's kind of one way to think about it is the way that I was just saying, how like, well, if you can carve a face on a tree and that does something, then you could apply that same magic technique to other things. Carve a stone face, or an ice face, maybe. I don't know. And maybe that will do something. My theory about the stone faces is that's old ones activity.
Okay.
Do you know about my Isle of Lang green men theory?
Yes, it's been a minute, but so essentially you think that, if I recall correctly, they're possibly the descendants of people from there because there's a similar physical description, and possibly some old magic-y stuff from Lang. Am I remembering that correctly?
So basically the theory is that the green men are the old ones from the jungles of Lang. And that the Langi themselves give you clues about that because they are super tall and they have golden eyes. Basically, they have the same skin tone as the children of the forest. They have large golden eyes like the children of the forest. And these old ones that they probably interbred with live in the deep jungle and in the caves. So it seems like there's tall children of the forest on Lang. But the Lovecraft angle is what makes it clear. Because on Lovecraftian Lang, which is an island, in some cases it's an island. In some cases it's a part of Antarctica. It changes. But on Lang there are goat beings, satyrs, goat-horned beings with goat. They have goat legs and human bodies and horns, and they are not the old ones, but they worship the old ones.
Okay.
So on Martin's Lang, he has made the old ones the satyr things, I think, because if you look at the use of the phrase "old ones," like if you word search "old ones" in Ice and Fire, it's very consistently used to refer to the old gods.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if you look in the caves of the old ones on Lang, you will find everything is carved in stone, and it goes down deep. And so I think that when we see carved stone in the Rainwood, basically, I guess what I'm saying is, if I'm right that the old ones on Lang and the Green Men are connected, either they came from one place or common origin, who knows? If they're the same things, then when we see stone weirwood faces, those would be the Green Men. But even without going that specific, we can just say that it's obviously the same tech, just used with stone instead of trees. So that is interesting that you differentiate it and say there may have been different old gods. So you're saying there may have been like wizards that used stone instead of trees.
I think it's possible with the way that it's phrased is that, like, essentially all of these different forces of nature could have been worshipped. And I kind of wonder if George is doing a thing of, like, power resides where men believe it resides. So if you worship a god for 10,000 years, that god is going to hold power because it is given by the worship. Whereas if no one's worshiping or praying to the stones, they're probably not going to be that powerful. But, like, I kind of wonder if either one could have been a vessel for a similar old god.
Well, I think we've walked our way up to the theory basically by saying if stone can be used to store magic, then
Harrenhal is that, probably.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, you could potentially tie souls to it. And we saw that George was experimenting with the glass candles in the Feast for Crows drafts, where discarded idea, there are more glass candles and they're more common, and sorcerers bind their consciousness to them, and they cannot die so long as their candle flame is extinguished. So it's like a what's the Harry Potter word for that?
Horcrux.
Essentially, it's a soul jar is what I like to call them, because it's a classic fantasy trope. You kill the evil wizard, but he's not dead because he has a soul jar somewhere back in the temple, and you got to break it before he dies. So it could be that just like the weirwood store souls, the Valerians and the Great Empire of the Dawn people, they could be using the glass candles or other the Bloodstone Emperors or the Blackstone whatever to do that. So cool.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, like, the glass candles as a parallel. If George sticks with that idea of having you be able to bind your soul to them and have the immortality, it's very similar to being strapped up to the weirwood, like those Greenseers who are still alive in Bloodraven's cave. It's like, if you're strapped up to the weirwood or the glass candle, as long as both of those are getting a constant supply of blood, your life will be sustained. Because in the unused draft, the Faceless Man says that the bond to the candle needs to be renewed from time to time with blood, and the weirwoods have to be fed blood. You assume that that's probably what keeps the Greenseers alive. So basically they're parallel there. And just in case we don't get back to the glass candles thing, one thing that I also thought was really cool from those drafts is that Melisandre, in her introduction chapter with Maester Crescent, originally Crescent had a glass candle that he was trying to light every day, and it lit because magic had returned. And so Melisandre's last line of her intro chapter is how her eyes are glowing with the red, like, candle flame. I can't remember. It was like something like the candle flame reflecting off of her red eyes as Crescent
He kept
collapses.
that line. He just removed the glass candle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was a glass candle originally, which I think is a bit of a hint that Melisandre is probably bound to a glass candle. Like, that's my kind of take on how Melisandre stays alive, is she's bound to a glass candle whether she knows it or not. And part of her burnings might be recharging that connection to her candle. And that's why she feels stronger and gets more visions or more blessings from the Lord after she burns somebody. It's because her bond has been restored.
Okay.
Her connection to her magic, basically.
Well, I'd say it's either the glass candle specifically or something like that, if Martin has decided not to go with. I think he's going to reuse that idea, though. I don't think that idea is gone. I think it makes too much sense. Especially the Great Empire of the Dawn spirits that Dany sees. she hasn't contacted Quaithe yet. They haven't met. Quaithe hasn't touched her with her 2-finger touch, which I think establishes something, some kind of link. So I think that her dreams in a Game of Thrones are coming from the dragon's eggs, or just from the ether. And so those great Empire of the Dawn spirits, like, they either exist somewhere or they don't. But if they do, where are they?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's interesting. Essentially, are the different afterlives just different hive minds, and they're like hanging out, ready to jump into people's dreams when required?
Oh, well, okay. So I want to ask you about the single most confusing question that I have for magic. And you touched on it in your video that I watched. And we're talking about the psychic animals in the story and the idea that some of these animals have a psychic network. Okay, the dire wolves can communicate with each other psychically, and I think the Starks will be able to use that to communicate with each other psychically. That may be how Jon and Bran communicated before Bran reached the Weirwood Cave. I think that is the answer to that. The mystery is this. We are told that all of the ravens have the souls of children of the forest in them. Last time I checked, ravens do not live hundreds of years. Children of the forest do. They live much longer. So how do the ravens have the souls of children? Like, how does a children die and then a raven is still alive for someone else to bond with it? How does that work? That can't be a literal thing.
So this is one of my favorite things. I've been thinking about this a lot over the last couple weeks. Ever since I put out that video, it's been kind of in the back of my mind. What I think is happening, and then the implications of that are crazy, but what I think is happening is what Bloodraven is saying is that when the children of the forest die, they jump into a bird. And then for the rest of time, they are jumping around from bird to bird. Because, you're right. Like,
it's a hive mind.
Based on the lifespans. Yeah, it's a hive mind. Just based on the lifespans, they can live in all of these birds. And all of the children of the forest who ever lived are now part of that hive mind, jumping around from bird to bird. So it's where they stay forever. And that makes complete sense, other than the fact that, I thought you go into the weirwoods when you die. So if all of the children of the forest, when they die, are living inside of these birds, is no one in the weirwood? Is the weirwood hive mind like a separate thing? Is it connected to these birds? Like, can you jump out of a bird and go live in the trees? Or are you stuck in a bird, hopping from bird to bird forever? Like, I could see a situation where the idea of going into the trees when you die isn't even real. The people who die at the foot of the trees feed the Greenseers with their life energy and their blood. The actual afterlife for the old gods is this hive mind inside the ravens. But I don't know. There's a lot of questions raised.
So I think I agree with a lot of that. And this is very speculative territory, obviously. But I do think... so there are some lies here. I agree with that. I think that the only people that would join the Weirwood Net hive mind would be the Greenseers, people that have green seed. The children of the forest that die and are not Greenseers do not go into the Greenseer Net hive mind. I've never thought that. That doesn't make sense. Some of this language is general. Like, they go down into the rocks and into the stone. Like, they go back to nature. That's all that says. I think, like with Varamir, his spirit blows over the rocks, but then it zooms into the wolf and it lands in the wolf. If he hadn't have been a dire wolf, his spirit would have dissipated on the wind back into nature, and his consciousness would have dissipated with it. That's what it means to join a hive mind. It means your individual sense of self dissolves. And I love that we're both tuned into like all the hippie stuff in George's writing, which is there's a lot of it. But
there is.
So with the birds, it seems to me that the children of the forest that are in the birds would be the skin changers, who weren't Greenseers, but they were skin changers. And I think a lot of children of the forest were skin changers. And so I think that essentially those skin changers are living in, yeah, it has to be a hive mind because of the problem that the birds don't live as long as the children. And they say, oh, all the birds have singers in them. There's way more birds
Yeah.
than children of the forest.
Yeah.
Like, it's not
There's
close.
there's like a match for like if it's all of the Greenseer or all of the children of the forest who have ever lived that had the warging ability, then it makes a little more sense. But yeah, if it's just like an individual like 1-to-1 lineup where like you share the skin of a bird, you go into that bird, when that bird dies, you're gone. That can't be how it works.
Right. So
You have
so
to
for example,
continue on.
Orel. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say you have to continue on like into a new bird when that one dies, and then you just keep going forever. It seems like.
So I was basically going to propose that since Orel lingers on in the bird that Varamir takes over, and Varamir's like, oh yeah, he hates you, Jon Snow. You know, Orel remembers he hates you. There's a little bit of him left in that bird. Well, yeah, but after that bird dies, what happens to Orel's spirit? Does, you know what I mean? It joins the bird net.
Yes,
At that
exactly.
point.
But
Yeah.
it's weird though because Bran is still able to sense the individuality of the child who he's sharing a raven with. Like she hasn't completely like dissipated into the hive mind because he recognizes it's a woman of the children of the forest, and Bloodraven just like, oh yeah, that's the woman of the singers. She's just a shadow on the soul. She will not harm you. But like, there's some individuality still there, which is kind of interesting.
You're right. So it could be that George hasn't worked all this out totally.
Yeah, that too. That too.
And this is why I like this question because, like, we might have found something he didn't think through all the way. It's like, well, how do all the birds have children in them if the children live much longer? But I think that there is enough evidence to say there is some collective nature to it. And people in the chat are also bringing up, of course, gradually you fade into the animal. So right now, Varamir is still palpable, or Orel is still palpable in the bird, but give him 10 years and you might not really be able to.
There is another option as well, and that could be if there's reincarnation. Like if the soul of the bird that you are bonded to is being reincarnated every time it dies, maybe you stick with a bird you're bonded with through multiple lives if that's what's going on. I can see
That makes sense because I think that's going on with the dragon bond, where a Valyrian ancestor is sacrificed to a dragon, and then the dragon's children can bond with that Valyrian's children. The spirit that went in the first dragon has to pass on to its children dragons in order for that to work. So I basically ended up in the same place, and I've got a big video coming out. I was going to put it out this week, but now I'm holding it because I decided to do this instead. But dreams come from dragons, big overarching dragon dream theory. And basically I ended up in the same place where, like, with the Valyrian spirits and stuff, there must be a hive mind of spirits and souls that is supported by the dragons. And I think that's where the Great Empire of the Dawn Emperors might be broadcasting from. And I think that is that the spirits of the dragon lords that are going into the dragons, I think they are still there in some sense, in some collective sense. So where was I going with that? Nowhere. This is where we meant to be.
Well, one thing I was going to bring up
the
to
birds,
the other.
That's right. Go ahead.
Okay, if you remembered where you were going with
No,
it.
I just remembered the conversation we were having, but go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. And so one of the other crazy implications of that is like it's another like that one little line from Bloodraven drops so much lore that people just kind of gloss over. The Raven hive mind is the first part, but the second part is that the First Men Kings used to just jump into the ravens and go say the message to whoever they were sending the message to, and now they can't skin change anymore, or they don't remember, and maybe not as many can skin change. So now they write it on parchment and send it with the raven. But he says that his implication of like kind of poking fun at the modern day people for writing it on parchment of birds they've never shared the skin of implies that the olden days you would hop into all of these birds. So that also sort of implies that a bunch of old first men are probably part of that raven hive mind if it is just continually going forever. So like, there's a bunch of Bran's ancestors in those
Yeah,
birds,
it
probably
would
looking
be.
at him.
It would be in bird net and direwolf net. Yeah, this makes sense. I
Yeah,
think this is how, like I said, looking at the dragon side of it, it's just like, okay, it's all these things are similar but different. Like there's little
yeah,
variations, but George keeps his magical mechanics similar. Like astral projection is
right.
the key to a lot of these magics, but if you use it with animals, it works one way. If you use it with trees, it works another way. And if you use it with a glass candle, it works another way. But we're still doing
Yeah,
astral projection at its core. So
yeah,
it's same thing with psychic abilities. We see psychics can use all different mediums to see the future. There's no bottling up the future. It's leaking out everywhere. Okay, so we
yep,
talked about Harrenhal's stones and a few other
yes,
things.
yes, yep,
Another factor at Harrenhal is Damon's dragon blood. It does not seem to be a dragon dream. There's no dragons in the dream,
right,
and Damon he's never had prophetic dreams. So it's more likely that he's having weird dreams because he's at Harrenhal and it's a magical castle and there's Alys
yeah,
Rivers. But I did want to mention that he obviously is a dragon-blooded person. Even if he doesn't have dreams, he is someone that has a psychic link to an animal. It's not
yeah,
the dragon bond is comparable to skin changer bond. It is not as active. We do not see Dany doesn't see out of Drogon's eyes. She doesn't dream of being inside Drogon and eating people and stuff, which would be cool, but she doesn't.
yeah.
But there is a low level psychic link. We've seen that. Damon raises his arm, the dragon raises its wing. So
I,
there is some psychic magic in Damon's veins.
yeah, I
So
just had a thought about Dany. I wonder if she will once she like fully bonds to Drogon. I wonder if she'll ever have a dream inside his POV because like I think she's kind of been splitting her bond between the three of them, and then right at the end when she first rides Drogon and then flies off with him is kind of when that bond is getting fully strengthened. So I wonder if like Winds of Winter Dany will have a dream where she's like roasting someone alive as as Drogon.
well, that'll be a major lore update if that
Yeah,
happens.
yeah,
I tend to think that we will not see that, and that the dragon bond is not as
birds
psychic.
on my side.
Yeah, the bird's on your side exactly. She votes every once in a while.
Yeah,
Yeah, never mind. No, it's totally. We will see that.
but yeah, no, I don't know. That's just something that popped into my head as you mentioned that.
For
I'm like,
sure.
yeah, I never thought of that. I wonder if like fully bonded Danny's gonna look any different.
Oh yeah, and
If
shout out
he
to Grey
is.
West Tim who did pop his head in the chat. He thought this was a produced video to put on in the background while he was working, and it's not. It's a live stream. Tim, we're cooking here, buddy. You're gonna
Yep.
like this one. I'll have to have you on a different time to chop it up with Michael here. Tim, also a man after our own heart, loves. We haven't talked about the
Yep.
Night Fort at all. This is embarrassing.
I know. We'll get there. I'm guessing this will be a long one.
Yeah, or it's 420 actually. Praise Garth. Shout out to.
There we go.
Yeah, have you seen my Praise Garth shirts that I got for sale?
I have, yes. I'm a big fan of the Praise Garth meme. So
No, just the
yes.
meme though, not the.
Well, and the act of
Okay.
the act of praising Garth in whatever way is legally allowed by your state and or territory.
Yeah, you knew
Yeah.
the your Scooby Doo jokes were a little too detailed. I was like, okay, I see it. All right.
There are
Could
hints.
Danny's
There are hints.
So Abigail, okay, here's a great question. This is an old question of mine. This is a good one to throw at you. It's on topic. Dany is half Blackwood. She's as much Blackwood as Bloodraven, kind of, sort of,
Yeah.
because Egg marries Bethwa Blackwood. Egg's mother is a Dane. He marries a Blackwood. I sometimes say those backwards and marry Egg to his mother, but Egg did not marry his mother. We've not seen any Targaryens do that. Although maybe, who knows? No, Egg marries a Blackwood, and then his kids have incest for a couple generations, preserving the approximate mix of blood. And so Rhaegar is half Blackwood, and so is Dany. And when we say half Blackwood, we know also that genes don't work quite like that. But it's just saying she has as much Blackwood stuff as she does Targaryen stuff. Arguably more, because her Targaryen stuff is half Dane.
Yeah.
So do you think either the Dane blood or the Blackwood blood could have anything to do with the fact that Dany is the first person that can hatch dragons and all that? Like, is it the Great Empire of the Dawn Dane blood? Is the Greenseer Blackwood blood? Does it reinvigorate the dragon stuff? What do you think?
That would make sense. I think it could potentially come important later on in the story if, like, Daenerys ever has to build any sort of connection to the weirwood net as well as her dragons. Like, whether it is, like, bonding with the weirwood net on any level or burning the weirwood net, and, like, her having some old god's blood when she does that being important. Like, I could see something like that if Daenerys, part of what she ends up doing is destroying the old world tree so that a new one could be born. Perhaps having some old god's blood is in some way magically required to be able to destroy the thing. You have to, like, be descended from someone connected to it type of a situation.
Right, and
so that's kind of, or I was just gonna say that's kind of like where I think it might be going with the whole, like, ice and fire connection that's always been teased at, like a Stark and Targaryen, and all of a sudden we end up with that with Jon and Dany, or with Jon and with Dany having Blackwood blood. Like, the old gods, new gods blood genetics connection, I feel like could be leaning towards someone needing to do something specific that requires their foot in both camps.
Yeah, I just can't think that it's an accident or just for funsies that the last two bloodlines that have married into Targaryen before the prince that was promised was born were the Danes and the Blackwoods, which, even if you don't go with any specific theories about either house, they are the two most magical and mysterious houses besides, like, Stark and the main ones. And then more specifically, the fact that Bloodraven is half Blackwood. And then Dany has all the Blackwood blood. It's like, so it's important for Bloodraven, but we're just not supposed to think about Dany having just as, like, it's got to have something to do with it. It's got to. In fact, I think, in my heart of hearts, I think it is all three. I think that all of that stuff was important. Dane blood and Blackwood blood. And if we subscribe to the theory that Bloodraven is pruning the Targaryen family tree in order to steer towards the outcome, then he very easily could have helped arrange these marriages as well.
Yeah, I agree. And, I mean, whether Bloodraven is for sure or not, the old gods seem to be... I talked about that pretty recently in a video. The Ghost of Highheart comes to court, gives the prophecy that the prince that was promised will come from this specific line, and the Targaryens actually listened. And then that line is the line that produces Rhaegar, Dany, Jon. Rhaegar, who throws the entire kingdom, and the Mad King, who throws the entire kingdoms into chaos, and then two of the potential heroes of the story at the end, like, directly set up from the Ghost of Highheart, who, whether you agree with my theory that she's a child of the forest or not, she is getting her visions likely from a weirwood. So it's just straight up the old gods are reaching out and being like, hey, do this. The Targaryens do that thing, and then they get the results, seemingly, that the old gods want. So
she's either part child of the forest or fully child of the forest. It's one or the other.
I agree. It could be half and half,
I like your idea that she's using a glamour because it's like she's... glamours aren't supposed to stretch the truth too far, like you say.
Yeah.
And so she looks kind of like a child. She, like, the idea that she is actually a full child of the forest who's just twisting her appearance to look like an old lady and, like, limping around. But if she wants to, she can do the Pycelle. She could toss down the cane and start doing the maester aerobics or whatever. Climb the tree really fast.
Probably did that at Summerhall when the fires started going. She's just like, oh, throw that walk out and just start running full speed away. Oh man, imagine, like, if that's a scene at some point in a Dunkin' Egg or in the show at some point where you have this old woman who's been, like, tottering along the entire time. All of a sudden, fire starts going. She just runs, books at full speed, and gets out of there.
No, somewhere Pycelle and the Ghost of Highheart are at the disco together.
Yeah, exactly.
Being way too flexible.
The
Okay.
Ghost of High Heart too, I think, is just one of those that George is just doing the wordplay very directly because he says that High Heart is an important location that's haunted by the children of the forest who were killed there, and then you have the Ghost of High Heart, who is said to be a child of the forest. It's just like it's just direct. Like the ghosts there are children of the forest. The character called the Ghost is said to be a child of the forest. I think that's just what George wants us to think about.
And so the Ghost of High Heart, we are gonna talk about Alys Rivers. I labeled the stream Alys Rivers. This is all set
Yeah.
up for what magic she's
Yes.
using.
Yes.
Could she be the Ghost of High Heart? Some people have wondered. And if she is not, were they like frenemies? They're kind of in the same area. They're both.
That's the thing, yeah. All of these woods witches who could potentially be child of the forest or like half child of the forest and have these long lifespans, they might all know each other. I'm
Is there
reminded
is
of
there a
another line.
confab every 10 years? Every 100 years. They don't need to hold it that often, really. But
I'm reminded of another line in Avatar: The Last Airbender, where like throughout the entire series, there's like this wise old guy who like he'll go to a different location and he'll play like a certain like it's like a game of it's like Go or like chess, but he plays a certain tile, and these other old people will play another certain tile, and that's like their initiation to this like secret order. And then at the end, like all of these like badass old people who you've met throughout the series are all just chilling there because they're all a part of this same secret magical order. And this one guy's just like, "Oh yeah, all old people know each other. Didn't you know that?" It's just like that. That's how I feel about all of these woods witches. Oh yeah, all woods witches know each other. We get together at High Heart once every 3 years to chat about the visions and stuff.
and honestly, that's most shamanic cultures in real history. They do have that. I mean, at least once a year they have a confab. I think we hear about the skin changers doing that north of the wall. Actually, in fact, yes,
Do we?
Varamir
Okay.
does talk about that. There's the skin changer meetup.
Oh, cool. That
Yeah.
is cool. I'll have to look into that.
Totally. So George is into that. Let me grab that super chat. There was one. See, in the last episode, when Alys Rivers told Damon, "You will die here," it seemed like she was looking past the weirwood tree and at a body of water. So we will come back to that. To go any more particular with that, we got to get past the spoilers. I got some police tape in the notes, so we'll come back to that summertime. Remind me if I don't remember. Boris Codefood says whites like Mel's not a white, in my opinion. I think she's transformed slowly over time.
Yeah, I'd say there's something different going on. I think she's probably more likely bound to a glass candle than a full on white.
And Gregor, we don't know what Gregor is. He's some sort of zombie. Cold Hands, obviously an ice white. Let's see. All have black blood, which may support what you said about the oily black stone. Oh, right. Yes, it's either similar or directly related. Yeah, all the magically transformed people have burnt blood. I think that's like thematic a lot.
Yeah.
Using magic has a heavy cost. It burns your blood. Changes you into
Yeah.
something unnatural.
I was just gonna say, since Gregor was brought up and you said whatever he is, what do you think of the idea of whether it's glass candles or like if George is using that same idea and he's gonna shift it to some other magical device, whatever. The idea that you could be bound to a glass candle. Could Qyburn have found a glass candle in the Red Keep somewhere with, the pyromancers and the Targaryens, and knowing what he knows from his time at the Citadel, who also has glass candles, could he have bound Gregor to a glass candle that's sitting under the Red Keep somewhere?
Yes, now that you mention it.
That's kind of what I think might be happening, because he needs other bodies that he's like sacrificing on some level.
She's all used up, I'm afraid.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I wonder if he's like feeding the energy to the glass candle slowly, and that's just what he's doing. But I don't know. That's just a bit of a random guess, but it all kind of fits.
Well, he's definitely using some of the mana from the people he's killing to do whatever magic he's doing. I've always thought that George is just doing Frankenstein stuff, and that we were never going to get an explanation. It's just he likes Frankenstein, and so Qyburn is his. It's weird. It's pseudoscience.
The only way I see us getting an explanation is if it's important in how he's killed. Like if the mountain has to be killed at some point, and there's some like magical means keeping him alive, I could see a scenario like one of the scenarios I proposed is um the mountain if there's a Clegane bull, whatever the circumstances, right? If they're fighting or if someone is fighting the mountain's doing bad things and needs to be put down. If he's attached to a glass candle that's down in the Red Keep somewhere, Arya could either be using her knowledge of the Red Keep or her ability to warg cats who live down in the Red Keep and go and like knock over the glass candle or like whatever as Sandor's like stabbing dude and he won't die. He's chopping off limbs. He won't die no matter what he does. All of a sudden, Arya, in her own body or warged into a cat, maybe Balerion, Rhaenys old cat, the one that's been around for 20 years.
Yeah, no, it would be.
Knocks over the thing, and all of a sudden the mountain just dies. That would be.
I'm here for it. I wouldn't complain about that. That's pretty fun. It's very creative, Michael.
It's a bit of a step on top of a step, but if that is what's happening, I could see. I mean, you got to kill the mountain somehow.
And to get back to the super chat, the idea that all the magically transformed blood is black, yes, it does sort of tie into what I'm saying about the bloodstone, oily black stone having some sort of magical blood sacrifice component. Because even if it's just, if it's, I unhid the Pyramidion account, by the way, just now for the person in the chat asking about that. That should be good to go. Even if the oily black stone is just pieces of broken moon, it's all symbolized with moon blood. The bleeding stars, the moon blood, the blood in the sky, waves of blood. It's over and over and over. So all this is coded as blood.
Yeah, I think that moon too might have, if it was used the way I kind of think it might have been before it broke, it could have been used as just a constant source for blood magic. So like it could be a literally like bloody blood magic-y moon full of spells and people sacrificing to the moon for a while before that.
So I am iffy on putting souls in the moon. I am a lot more convinced of using the moon's power for magic. I definitely think that is what the others are doing and what people have done in the past. Yes.
Also, I hate to do this to you, but if you have a couple super chats, could I step away for like 5 minutes? My grandma's called me like a few times.
Of course.
I think she needs help. One of the other grandkids has a baseball game. She needs to get over to the other tab so she can watch the live stream of the game.
You got to tech support your absolutely.
I got to tech support my grandma. If you want to mute me, and then I'll be right back. When I
You're
pop
a good
back
man,
in screen,
Michael.
I'll be good. So I'll be right back.
Very good. That's how you know this guy is quality. Got to help my grandma hang out. It's like the opposite of when someone kicks the dog, right? Like we saw on House of the Dragon. George, by the way, in case you missed it, George Martin on his Not a Blog, Cleo, come here, come step up, had a really cool post today where he was talking about the writing on House of the Dragon and how much he is enjoying the performances and some of the choices. He praised Helena's adaptation in particular, said so much more than what was in Fire and Blood, and he really likes Helena. And he singled out the dog. He's like, this was such a nice thing to add to the story that Cheese has a dog. Because, one, he said, I never hated Cheese more than when he kicked that dog. And then something like that. And then he's talking about how at the end, when we see the dog looking at Cheese, sadly, like, oh, well, who's going to take care of me now? George said he liked that because it humanized even this awful person and shows you, like, even he was caring for something. And there was somebody that depended on him for care, So George famously loves to show us the human side of monsters and the monstrous side of humans. So, yeah, that's a pretty cool blog post that he put up there. If you didn't see that. And, somebody will adopt the dog. Maybe they'll show us. Maybe Hugh, Hard Hugh Hammer will take the dog in. Oh, guys, please don't. Let's not bring depressing politics into this chat. It's really bad right now. You guys are going to bum me out. Okay, so where do I want to go next? we've talked about the blood in the stones and how they could be used for psychic power. The weirwood is the center of this, basically. The weirwoods are potential, like we were talking about, the reason why Harren built the castle there in the first place. And even if he didn't build it there on purpose, which is hard to believe, it's clearly interacting with the magic of the weirwoods. The Isle of Faces is right there. We know that Harrenhal did keep a godswood, and we can see on the show that the weirwoods are taking back over the castle. So, the reason why I wanted to do this stream was because I wanted to think about the idea of Alys Rivers as a Greenseer. If the weirwoods are part of the mechanism that is sending Damon this dream, and if she is messing with it, then that means that she is capable of messing with the weirwoods. And to the best of our information, only Greenseers can use the magic of the weirwoods. And that would imply that Alys Rivers is a Greenseer. Either that or she is not using the magic of the weirwoods. Or non-Greenseers have a way of maybe, I don't know. I really can't make that work. Is Alys Rivers confirmed to be an alchemist? Well, so that's the thing about woods witches. Woods witches are first and foremost known for their potions and alchemical brews and solutions. So, yeah, that would certainly make sense if he was doing that. So, yes, the actress playing Alice said, oh, she could be, maybe she's been around for 400 years. So I made a joke because Melisandre, they said the same thing about Mel. They said, oh, well, she's 400 years old. So I said all sorceresses on Game of Thrones are always 400 years old. I don't think that is a specific number that's meant to imply anything. However, it does lead us to the question of how old she is and where she comes from. So, Michael, welcome back. I was just trying to frame the main question of this video, which is Alys Rivers a Greenseer? Okay, so we were talking about Damon's dreams, and we're saying, okay, maybe the weirwood has something to do with the dreams. Specifically, since he wakes up in front of the weirwood, it's kind of suggesting that all the magic at Harrenhal might be influenced by the weirwood. But the question is Alys Rivers messing with Damon's dream? And if so, is she using the power of the weirwood? Is she accessing it somehow? And does that mean that she is a Greenseer? So I was saying either Damon is having a Jaime-like weirwood stump dream, and Alys is just observing and using her own psychic power to sort of jump on top of that. Or is she actually inside of Damon's dreams through the weirwood? And if it's the latter, then that kind of implies that she has the ability to access weirwood magic, which implies that she's a Greenseer. So somebody was just bringing up the 400 years old thing. Well, if Harren cut down weirwoods, could she be lingering around this castle because she was tied to the weirwood grove that got cut down to build the castle? So dive in on any of that. But what do you think about that angle? Oh, you're still muted. I think this is my end. Hang on.
There we go. I was gonna say I could see the little thing down in the bottom, but I'm like, well, we'll see if I'm talking when he can, or we'll see if he can hear me when I start talking. But okay. So I think that it's tough to say with just this one dream if she was influencing it or not, because as you said, it's very Jaime-like, where it could just be his own personal trauma that's just welling up. But I could definitely see her being a character who has that ability, like the ability to send dreams. So I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the season we're going to see her, sending a dream to somebody. But I don't necessarily know that this one, we don't have enough to say for sure. This
Correct.
Was sent by Alys Rivers.
I agree. And just to clarify on the super chat, this is exactly the question we're talking about. Is Alys a Greenseer the related question is she the one before Bloodraven? Okay, so here I will shout out Gray Area. Gray Area has a theory, which I disagree with, but will still recommend you check out because you guys know I love Gray Area and respect her very much as a theorist. And a lot of her theories, like her Inaluki, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn stuff, is canon to me. I think she also has an Old Nan Nettles video. I'm pretty sure she does.
Okay.
So Gray thinks that Damon is the three-eyed crow before Bloodraven. I have a strong resistance to the theory because, to me, you have to have the first man children of the forest blood to be a Greenseer. Even if there is a connection between the dragon bond and skin changing, that to me would be an ancient bond, not an ancient blonde. That's different. An ancient bond. Old Nan could be an ancient blonde.
That's a different version of Melisandre, yeah. We got
And
an
that the
ancient
trains
redhead
can't
and
skip
ancient
the-
blonde.
Sorry, finish. I'm sorry, I cut off your joke.
Oh, no.
I'm taking it
no.
too seriously, Michael.
No, I was just saying, ancient redheads, ancient blondes, we got them all.
And so Gray has a theory that it's Damon. She followed that up with a new video today. So go check that out.
Okay.
I don't want to try to sum up her theory poorly and represent it. I'm basically just saying I don't think it was Damon because I don't think Damon can be a Greenseer. She does think that he can be a Greenseer for various reasons, so go check out her video. I am more focused on Alys. I think that the evidence, it makes more sense to me that Alys is a Greenseer, even before this episode, just because she's hanging out at Harrenhal and doing lots of different kinds of magic, which is hard to put your finger on. But now what we've seen here on the show makes me wonder even more if it is Alys. Yeah. So just to answer the super chat, that is what we are drilling down to. Could it be Alys Rivers? I feel like we should have the answer. I feel like this is a mystery that George should be giving us the clues for, and I've always been frustrated that we can't figure it out. So I am excited about the idea that it could be Alys. But let's back up and just go with this first question of who is Alys? Where do you think she might have come from? Could she be associated with the old gods? One more thing I will throw at you to set you up. Coheres. Gargan Coheres. Gargan the Guest. He is the second person to rule Harrenhal after Black Heron. And he abuses the right of the first night. He sleeps with all of his vassal women coming in on the wedding night. And it says that he just made free with the women of his vassals and knights. So he's basically a serial R-wordist, okay? Yeah. And he ultimately is killed in the Harrenhal Godswood. He is castrated, and his genitals are fed to a dog, and he bleeds out in the Godswood. So he was given to the old gods. And that is interesting to me because the people who came and threw him down were not old gods worshippers. I forget who it was, but they were not old gods worshippers. So it's almost like there are old gods worshippers at the castle who wanted to be appeased and who took a hand in performing this act of giving Heron to the Godswood. Not Heron, yeah. I'm sorry. Gargan the Guest. And so this makes me wonder, like, is Alys Rivers there? Is she the one cutting his balls off? Is she the one directing this to happen? Go ahead.
She could definitely be, like, keeping some sort of watch over the place. I thought you were going to suggest, would she be, like, a descendant of one of these first knightings, and then, like, her father was sacrificed to the tree, and then therefore she's magically connected now? I don't know. But I tend to think, so I'll say I am not super in-depth, like, it's not my area of expertise, the Fire and Blood stuff. I'm, like, vaguely aware of a lot of it, but then, like, I kind of, like, fell out of the fandom for a couple years after the end of the TV show and was, like, brought back in here recently, like, a year or two ago. And, like, because House of the Dragon was coming, I never dove, like, deep into Fire and Blood stuff. Mm-hmm. I haven't avoided spoilers, but I'm not, like, going out and, like, researching everything about it. So, like, I don't have super firm, like, I don't have, like, an expansive knowledge of all of the details of Alys Rivers, but I do, from what I'm aware of, think it's possible that she's, like, half child of the forest, or, like, one of those situations where, like, if she's a bastard, of how strong he could have slept with a woods witch in a glamour at some point or another, and all of a sudden she's just like, oh, like that could be kind of how they infiltrate a lot of these human situations, is like either use a glamour or have a half child of the forest baby who's going to look like a person but can live for a lot longer and do their magic. So I could see her being one of those, but I don't really know if that is going to ever be confirmed. I don't know if there's anything to like be like, oh, there's George hinting at it.
So, you said a few things that were interesting there. My brain is spinning, and also looking at the chat here.
Yeah.
It is outright suggested that she is wearing a glamour, and that she is older than she looks. I mean, that is in Fire and Blood when they go over the various stories about her age. So
I wasn't sure if there was any talk of like a gemstone for a glamour. I was on the lookout for one, but didn't see one in her like costume anywhere.
No, there's not a gemstone that's named. No, it's just some people when they're talking about how old she is. I think they mention.
They imply.
Maybe they don't mention a glamour. Maybe they mention bathing in blood to preserve.
I think that's what I saw, is that she bathes in blood, which is like just what's talked about with these magical women who look younger, but like at the same time, if she's using weirwood magic or glass candle magic to remain young and keep her youthful look, and they're both fed with blood, that is kind of. It's similar to the blood in the stones thing. Like, it might not be literal, but it also is kind of magically, literally what's happening. Like, using other people's blood to maintain her youth.
Yeah. So, as far as let me just skipping ahead real quick to her powers. She does a bunch of different stuff, which is all very hard to pin down. Amond says that she sees the future in a storm cloud, in a mountain pool at dusk, in a fire we lit to cook our suppers. So sounds like Melisandre vision, but not just limited to fire. She can use water or clouds, but it's the same idea. If you can see
sounds
the future,
old godsy version of the same thing, basically.
That's a good way to describe it. She also causes someone's head to explode. When they come to the castle, she basically lifts a finger and someone's head explode, and the maesters are like, must have been a Tolosi slinger. But everyone there says it was magic. And we've never seen anything like that, so we don't know what that is. And then she remote force chokes somebody, kind of. It seems like she lays a spell or a curse on someone and says, oh, go carry my message, and if anyone laughs at what you say, then you will die. And so he goes and he says, no one laugh, but here's what she says to tell you, and someone laughs, and then they see the imprint of hands on his neck, and he chokes. So it almost seems like a shadow baby, but you can see the shadow baby. So it's like an invisible shadow baby, or either that or Alys is like far away going like this, or she's got a little mommet, a little voodoo doll, and she's like, we don't know. Alys is a Sith. Yes, obviously. That's the answer. She's a Sith. Just like Lares. It all fits together, right? All the Strongs are Sith. Why did I even do this stream?
Makes sense, yeah.
So this is what we have to work with. It's all filtered through hearsay, but none of it really lines up with anything that we've seen elsewhere. So she could be, like Euron is, a multi-purpose magic practitioner. Someone who just kind of, if you give me some shade of the evening, sure, I'll drink that. And if you give me a glass candle, I'll use that. And if I can use a Valerian Dragonbinder horn, I'll use that too.
Yeah, that is what it sounds like when it's mentioned that she can see the future in fires, but also the storm clouds and things like that. Because like that just, as I said, it's straight up old godsy. Like, being able to talk to trees is something Howland Reed is given credit for, and I think that kind of means that he can understand that language that is the leaves like rustling in the wind. So I think those visions, the ability to see visions and things that aren't just flame, are always out there. So she probably is just practicing, like you said, multiple branches, and therefore can read the future in multiple places, whereas maybe Melisandre's only maximizing her fire magic.
That is what I see, but also let's explore the idea that it is primarily old gods magic, and that there's more that we can that we know. So, for example, Bloodraven uses weirwood arrows.
Yeah.
Okay. Why? Is it the weirwood itself that has magic or is it, some people have proposed, is he able to guide them? Because they're made of weirwood, can he guide their path?
Yeah. That makes sense to me. I don't know how he would do that, but like if you wanted a magical arrow, that would be the thing you would want to be able to do. And like future Bloodraven is going to be connected to weirwoods, so like can future Bloodraven make sure all of his shots in the past hit by going back and like doing something, you know?
He can
like,
guide them, but from the future.
Yeah. Well, he just like lets them loose and he's just like, oh, this is great. They keep hitting. And then like, it's like old guy him is like paying for his youth. He's like, dang it, young me. I have to go back and make all of these shots hit because I didn't even bother to aim. It's like paying for all of the like physical activity he did when he was younger. He's just like, damn it, younger me.
One of my favorite, maybe my favorite original theory of yours is the Marwyn weirwood leaf chewing theory. I need to put Cleo back in my room. And so can I ask you to give like a 2 or 3 minute summary of that? Because the more I think about it, the more I think that this makes sense. I won't say that I think that it's true, but it definitely makes sense. And so could be true. Yeah. And then, I'll be right back. I'll be able to listen to while you're talking.
Okay, sounds good. That's basically where I'm at with it as well, is it's one where it's like, we're going to have to wait and see in the future books if this ends up being a thing. But so basically, the idea behind it for anyone who hasn't seen it is, I think what's going on with the weirwoods is that they're essentially, the blood sacrifice goes to the weirwoods as a way to put magical power into the trees. There's blood flowing through the trees. There's magical power flowing through all of the trees. Their sap is magical, all of this sort of stuff, which is why Bran is, to awaken his powers, fed weirwood sap, which might also have Jojen in it. So he's eating people, or he's eating weirwood sap, which might indirectly be people. But in any case, you eat the weirwood sap to get the magical power, and then you've got Marwyn, who is a guy who's like super obsessed with all of these ancient magical powers and trying to do all of this research to figure out what is going on with all of this stuff. So if anyone is going to know that, hey, weirwood sap contains some magical power, it'd probably be Marwyn. And so then he, when you meet him, is chewing sour leaf all the time, and he's got red leaves that he's chewing. And so that's just a perfect cover for if someone was going to chew sour leaf and cut it with like 50% weirwood leaves. And if you were chewing weirwood leaves, that might be like a micro version of eating weirwood sap, which is what we see Bran do. And so Marwyn might be eating weirwood leaves in order to gain small amounts of magical power, like on a constant basis. And what's perfect about this is right outside of Marwyn's building in the Citadel, there is a weirwood tree that's described as looking mostly dead, but it still has a few leaves left. So basically there's this big tree that's missing most of its leaves, and you can just kind of picture Marwyn like reaching up, snagging leaves, splitting his sour leaf 50-50 weirwood leaves, 50-50 sour leaf, so that he's got his cover, and he's just there chewing on weirwood leaves every day.
He's been eating it. He's been eating it so hard it's almost picked. It's like, Marwyn, dude, he's up on the habit, man. There's no leaves left.
That's why he wants to go. That's why he wants to go meet Dany right away. Is because he's like, yeah, I've used up almost my entire stash here. I gotta wait for these leaves to grow back before I come back to the Citadel.
He's opening up his chest when he gets there. It's like he's got his glass candle SKB case. I don't know if you're a guitar player, if you know what an SKB case is, but basically it's a hard shell case that's got the guitar shape molded in it. So he's got a glass candle case.
Glass candle shape.
He's got some clothes, and he's got a trunk of just dried weirwood leaves. Just like, bro. It's like, look, I've been gone for a while.
Yeah, that's how I imagine Marwyn traveling. He's just got like the bare essentials under one arm, a big like brick of weirwood leaves just under the other arm.
Yeah. The vacuum sealed turkey bags. Okay, all right, this is off the rails. So But no, but seriously, think about it, guys. Like the power is in the blood. The weirwood leaves are red because the weirwood leaves drink blood and have blood circulating through its systems. So there is blood in those leaves, I think, and chewing on them, you would be essentially consuming magical blood. And why that should have an effect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
it's one of those that's just very straightforward, but like I don't know if we've seen the payoff yet. So like maybe there will be some big like implications of it later, but we just don't know.
Microdosing weirwood. Yeah, I think you called it that in your video. Yeah.
Yep.
So again, if you have not subscribed to Michael talks about stuff by now, go subscribe. He's got some good theories here. So I think that was the point when I saw that video. I was like, man, okay, that is. I just appreciate the fresh vision because again, I've been doing this a while, and after a while, you do calcify into groupthink or just your own headcanon about stuff, and you sail right by things that are screaming out. Like old Nan might be a child of the forest. Like, yeah, she might be. You're right.
That's one too, where it's like I think the fandom has to like worry about this in a lot of cases where you've sat with a certain theory for so long that it's just like it feels correct, even though it was like a 55-60% shot when you first heard it, but you haven't heard another really compelling explanation for the last 10 years of talking about these books. So suddenly you feel like, oh, it has to be this. You know, like people get very like set in their ways of which theory they think is most likely, that we almost at times forget like most of these are like a 50-50 coin flip. Like even theories that I feel are very strong are closer to a coin flip than 100% confirmed, you know.
I mostly try not to think about how much I have riding on whether or not there will be moon meteors in the next book, but sometimes I do think about it, and
yeah. It happens. I've definitely sat back and have been like, well, if there are no weirwoods in the wall, and I'm just like, well, I guess I got to go back to the drawing board. Is everyone going to be like, hey?
No, there definitely is.
Wrong.
Look, I don't know that there are people strapped to the weirwood trunks.
Yeah.
But there are definitely weirwoods in the wall, and I'm definitely convinced that the Night Fort was built around the weirwood organism there, and that the Night Fort was built before the wall, and that the order is weirwoods, Night Fort, then the wall, then the other castles. So
that's the other thing. Back to Harrenhal that we were talking about too. I was gonna bring up the idea that it's possible that Harren the Black was learning some Bran the Buildery stuff as well. But with how we have the Night Fort with the one like weirwood that is visibly in the walls of the Night Fort with the Black Gate and is literally breaking through in the same way we see at Harrenhal. He could have also learned about the Night Fort, and he could have been modeling Harrenhal after the Night Fort in the south. And that's why it could be so near the God's Eye, because that's the weirwood center of magical power that's already there, in the same way that the Night Fort weirwood might have been a center of magical power even before the castle was built around it. He could have been like trying to mimic this and do a new Night Fort.
Well, I think that it works out that way, whether or not he was trying to. And Summertime says this whole thing feels like Irish, Scottish, Celtic mythology. Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. With
a lot of this,
Norse
I wanted to have,
there.
to be honest, I was trying to get Faye Fire on this stream. And I should have shouted her out earlier. She has a couple of Alys Greenseers videos in which I make a cameo, actually, as a famous historian. But Faye Fire, she's very schooled on the Arthurian angle. And Alys Rivers is very much a parallel to, the sorceress.
That
lives on the island.
I'm blanking on the name.
Oh, it's Morgan Le Fay. It's so embarrassing. I never... I didn't read what's the series of books that do the Arthurian that everyone reads. I need to catch up. The chat is just
yeah, there you go.
Embarrassing. The Lady in the Lake. Morgan Le Fay. Alys Rivers is Morgan Le Fay, and Morgan Le Fay lives on the equivalent of the Isle of Faces. So,
Yeah.
in many ways, Alys Rivers is Morgan Le Fay, but instead of living on the magic island, she is in the haunted castle. And
Yeah.
so, this is another reason to think that she might be a Greenseer who is working on behalf of the people on the island, or that her real place is
Yeah.
on the island. She comes from the island, something like that. She is tied to the Isle of Faces. So, I only want to dip into that a little bit because obviously my knowledge of Arthurian stuff isn't good. But please do check out Faye Fire's Alys Rivers video because it is worth watching and it is very detailed. And the correlations to Alys are very, very obvious. So it doesn't mean that she is a Greenseer, but it is definitely a big point in favor of the idea that she can use the weirwoods and is working on behalf of the agenda of the old gods.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely seems like it is some version or another of that. It's just up in the air as to where the details are going to fall. And like we're probably going to get more hints as we go forward, but like the main thing that I'm just super excited about now is like after seeing this most recent episode, like we are going to get those answers, I think. Like there was a world where House of the Dragon, I think as you brought up earlier, went away from it, sort of like Game of Thrones did. And we're not in that world. They're going to go into the magic and the old godsy stuff. They're showing the Isle of Faces in the foreground of the intro shots. They're like giving us creepy weirwood visions. So like we're on the path to finding out more concretely about some of this stuff, I think, which is very cool.
Yeah, they are showing off their Isle of Faces in every shot of Harrenhal for sure. So that is, and with the weirwood being on the shore, reaching out to it, like there's no question they want us to notice that connection. So I really do tend to think that it is with for me on Alys, she is either a multi-magic use practitioner who is not necessarily using. Hey, it's Gray Area in the chat. So Gray, we are not to the spoiler section yet, but we're pretty much there. So yeah, go ahead and launch your question. We are fully 2 hours into this damn stream. So yes, it is now spoilers.
Should we give the spoilers warning? Yeah.
Let me just show off my tape here. I made some yellow tape place line, spoiler line.
Yep.
We've crossed spoiler. Yeah, go ahead, Gray, and welcome. I gave you a shout out only moments ago. Speak of the Gray, and she will appear.
One thing that might be pretty quick to bring up right before the question is just like I was going to talk about this in a video at some point soon, but one thing that's also kind of interesting that doesn't get talked about too much is the fact that one of the wildlings John climbs the wall with, he knows about the Isle of Faces.
Greg the Goat.
That's where he wants to go. Yeah. Like, how cool is it that like the wildlings know enough about the old gods that even though they've been cut off from south of the wall and don't know what a windmill is, for thousands of years they've been cut off, and yet he knows about the Isle of Faces, and he knows that the green men live there, which is something that a lot of Westeros doesn't even know. That to me is just very interesting.
Oh, great question, Gray. Okay, so the Greg the Goat thing I think is a very important clue because it shows you that the Green Man is one of the oldest religions in Westeros and predates the Andal layer. And that's what you'll find with Arctic hunter-gatherers. You will find the oldest myths because they have been pushed to the margins. All these layers of civilization conquering each other. But these Arctic hunter-gatherers up in Siberia, they have been left alone for a long time, and they have some of the oldest genetics and stories and things like that. So similarly, Greg the Goat having that Isle of Faces knowledge. So yeah, Gray, I was going to ask you about this actually, since we're queuing in on all these, like who's this, who's the Greenseer before Bloodraven, who's going to the Isle of Faces, is the Isle of Faces influencing what's going on at Harrenhal, and then later on we have this story about Adam Velaryon stopping by the Isle of Faces before raising an army to go and save the day at Second Tumbleton. And the maesters just kind of go, the singers say, it's not even a mushroom detail. It's the singers say, which is the most reliable to me. Actually, no, if you hear something at your mother's teat or your nursemaid's teat, that's the most reliable.
Yeah.
But the singers are right after that.
Yeah.
So I have never known what to make of that, but I haven't thought about it in a long time. And we have recently been thinking more about the interaction of the Isle of Faces and the Prince that was promised. Now, in the calendar art, the newest calendar art from Justin Sweet, it shows Rhaegar and Lyanna in front of a tree with a face. It's a white tree with a face. It has green leaves. I think that is the Isle of Faces, and that
Agreed.
this is a unique, original weirwood, and that the big clue about this is all the Green Hand stuff in the Reach. Garth Greenhand, Order of the Green Hand.
Yep.
If the weirwood leaves are, and this is Crowfoot's daughter's discovery, actually. She, before we even saw that calendar art, she speculated the original weirwoods would have green hand leaves instead of red hand leaves. So that is one of the reasons, Gray, why I take that tree to be an Isle of Faces original weirwood tree. Because it's like, if there was an original weirwood without red leaves anywhere in the world, it would be on the Isle of Faces. And then the other thing is that at the Black Gate, at the Night Fort, is the only place where we see, yes, and they might be the Green Men. Exactly, Gray. They could be the Green Man. So Garth the Green with green hands might just be their way of talking about these original weirwoods with faces and leaves. Absolutely, that is.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
in one of the drafts, one of the changed lines was when they're talking about how Howland Reed visited the Isle of Faces. In the published version, it says he said goodbye to the Green Men, I believe is how it says.
Mm-hmm.
But in the unpublished version, he originally wrote he said his goodbyes to the trees, and then sailed for whatever. So it's he literally said his goodbye to the trees, whether that is Black Gate style talking tree faces, or if the Green Men are an order who taught him to speak to the trees. And so, like, he knows how to pray to the trees so they can hear him, and he knows how to listen to the leaves rustle to understand them. And then he could say goodbye to the trees. Either one works, but yeah, it would also definitely work that the Green Men are those trees.
And so, and the reason why I think the Night Fort is so important, here we go, is because if you look at the original Night's Watch practices, which we see with John and Sam, and when I say original, I mean before the Andals came, all the Night's Watch would have been first men. Maybe there's a Ironborn in there once or twice, but they're all going to be weirwood worshipping first men, and so they would swear their oaths to the weirwood trees. And so you can see the original Night's Watch oaths are meant to be given to the weirwoods, and we see that's how the Black Gate works. Sam recites the shorter, aka the original version of the oath, and the tree hears that and accepts that as a passcode. So the origins of the watch, which we're told was organized by the children, it's all around these weirwoods. So when you think about a God's Wood, okay, think about the Night's Watch. They gather around the weirwoods and they swear their oaths to the weirwoods. Now, the head of the watch has a bird on his shoulder who's connected to the weirwoods and gets their orders from the bird. So in the books, we see the bird giving Mormont and John little suggestions, and at the kettling, it influences the vote. But if you think back to the olden days, when Mormont would have been a real skin changer, he would have been fully aware that that bird was his connection to the Greenseer hive mind. So I think you have to think about the original watch working in tandem with the three-eyed crow in the cave up north, which there's probably always been one. And so when you look at them kneeling in the Godswood, originally that would have been them like taking orders from the trees. Okay?
Yeah.
And so here's the last piece of it. The only uncarved weirwood face we see is the Black Gate, and that one can talk. All the bloody faces which have been knife carved, they don't talk. But this one that doesn't bleed, it's animated. So this to me is not a carved face, but an actual magical tree face. And so when we see, and I'll give this to you in just a second, and when we see the calendar art, it's got no blood. So I think the original weirwood faces could talk. And this is what's going on in the Godswood. Picture first men, the original Garth the Green, worshiping the trees as Garth. They would have just been sitting in front of these talking trees and literally getting their orders from Garth the Green. Go ahead.
That makes sense to me, and as you pointed that out, like, it just tracks so well because it makes me think of cargo cults.
Yes.
So the carved weirwood face is like the wooden mock airplane that they built because they wanted the airplanes to come back and bring them more food uh, after the war ended. Like that's what cargo cults would do. They would build a crude version of the magical thing that they loved so much. So if they were building their cargo cult style weirwood faces to talk to that couldn't talk back, but there was one that could, and maybe a few places where there was one that could at the Night Fort and on the Isle of Faces. Yeah, that makes complete sense to me, and like that, the mirroring of it by doing the crudely carved versions is really good.
And it's almost like trying to back together the original thing. Okay,
Yeah,
because originally the weirwoods have these faces and their green leaves. Well, they've all been something happened. They're all screaming and
yeah,
bloody now. They've been transformed. So it's like that to me. That's Azor Ahai's original sin, the long night, creation of the others. It's all tied together. And so yeah, the carving of the faces, it allows the trees to see out. You can see out that way, but they can't talk. And so it's everything now is like a limited stripped down version. But he's still giving us hints. When Osha's in the Godswood, she listens to the rustling of the leaves and that's the old gods trying to talk. And what does Bran want to do? He is trying to talk through the tree, but he can't. And Ned can almost hear him, and Theon can hear his name whispered. George is showing you like the original technology would have been better, and the Greenseers could have talked. So to get back to your question, Gray, about Adam, when you think about the green men on the Isle of Faces, doesn't it make more sense that there are these living, talking trees that are hanging out for 10,000 years than some sort of beings that have to walk around and eat and take a dump and pass the time and play games and stuff? Like, kind of makes sense that they're actually just trees.
yeah. Maybe some children of the forest upkeeping the trees that are like responsible for like the sightings of the green men with their antlers or
Could
whatever
be.
walking. But yeah, I do think that makes sense. And yeah, the whole visit to the Isle of Faces was what I was kind of hinting at in the pre-spoilery section of like,
Okay.
we're gonna get more hints. I was there was a world where they didn't do that, and I don't think that's what is gonna happen now. Like you could see them having skipped over the meeting on the Isle of Faces, now having seen like roots growing out of Harrenhal's walls. I'm pretty sure we're gonna get to see the Isle of Faces, and that they're gonna be like excited to give us that lore. That's just what I'm really excited about. It's just I'm sort of in wait and see mode of like, oh, we're getting answers. Yes, finally.
So let's here's one of the biggest questions that applies to all of this, whether it's Damon or Alys being a three-eyed crow, or Adam Velaryon stopping by the Isle of Faces, or Rhaegar and Lyanna on the Isle of Faces. We know that the old gods do care about the prince that was promised and about the Targaryen bloodline. We know that from, and then you talked about this in your video, obviously the Ghost of High Heart giving the prophecy that the prince that was promised will be born of Rhaegar and, I'm not Rhaegar, Aerys and Rhaella's line. Okay?
Yep.
So this is why they were married together by Jaehaerys I. They didn't even like each other, but they were married together anyway. Poor Rhaella. Take a moment to acknowledge. And so the old gods care. And obviously they care because they're concerned about the others and the long night and making sure the world doesn't die. That makes sense. So how far does it go? The old god involvement in the Targaryen bloodline. Obviously we talked about Bloodraven might be pruning the family tree to get it to where we want. That's an old theory. In Deep Geeks made a whole bunch of videos about that. It seems pretty solid. I don't know if it's every single murder is Bloodraven, but it does seem very possible. So then it's like, what are the old gods trying to do? And then, okay, so Gray's mentioning Aegon landing in Westeros almost as an antidote to Black Heron. Yeah, that timing is very coincidental. So what's their agenda? Well, the agenda would be to produce the prince that was promised. Now, we got to follow a twisting path to get there. Did the old gods screw up? It's like they're trying to help House Targaryen birth the prince that was promised. Maybe they're trying to help Egg, who's got a Blackwood wife, and he's Ghost of High Heart is at court while Egg is king, but then he does Summerhall. It all goes wrong. So did they screw up? Or are the old gods causing these great tragedies because that's the fire of purification that the bloodline's got to pass through in order to get to Daenerys?
So I tend to think, and this is just kind of based on my grand view of the state of the old ways and what is probably going to happen in the series. I think that there might be a situation where the one sending the visions to the Targaryens is doing so, going back and manipulating the chain of events to ensure that the old ways are eventually destroyed and the cycle of rebirth can happen. And in that case, it would be similar to how I view the House of the Undying, where it's like, did they screw up by allowing this dragon who has the magical fire that can kill them into their chamber? Why didn't they make Dany leave her dragon outside? Well, it's because this was set up so that they wanted to die. If this old weirwood system wants to be burned and potentially rebirthed into its original form or into a new form, or a new world tree could be born, whether it is the old gods themselves or whether it is Bran who eventually gets charge of the time machine that can send dreams, goes back and sends the required dreams, I think the destruction of the system itself might be the goal. So then in that case, it's not a screw up as much as like we need to have dragons around, but they need to have Stark blood and be a dragon rider and whatever, because these are the magical things they're going to need to do to destroy and then rebirth this weirwood system. That's kind of where
makes sense thematically. Like the dragons, they are, and Daenerys in particular, cleansing fire is very often how they are portrayed and the role that they play. So the idea that, the weirwoods are sick and they are trying to call the antidote over to Westeros, that kind of works for me. It kind of works for me. And then so let's talk about Alys and her agenda with Damon and Aemond, and then also Adam. Not Alys and Adam, but just Adam visiting the Isle of Faces. What are they trying to do with the dance? Are they trying to kill off the dragons? Are they trying to help one side win? Okay, so for example, with Alys Rivers, some people have suggested she's actually feeding Aemond to Damon. That she's not on Aemon's side, but that she's bringing him to Harrenhal so that they can kill each other. Either so she can rule Harrenhal, or because they both need to die, or I guess Gray Area would say so that Damon can get to the Isle of Faces. What's the agenda?
That's going to be really interesting to see like how they play her, like if she's playing them off of each other or what her goal is. But it's also tough to say because we don't know if like Bran or whoever's in charge of this is looking back with hindsight and if it's Bloodraven pruning the family line. Is Bloodraven pruning like preemptively, where he's like, I need to get rid of this person and this person because they don't have the bloodline that I need? Or is he pruning with the benefit of hindsight of like, the descendant is going to come through this specific line, so I need to do whatever it takes to get to these specific people in the family tree. Everyone else is just, whatever happens. I don't know. I could see a situation where what they're trying to do with the dance is they know, like they look at it from the future almost and are like, okay, we need to turn these dragons against one another to get rid of the dragons, but also we're going to have 3 dragon eggs that are still there that are going to be the ones we need, but the rest of these dragons got to go for whatever magical reason,
Yeah, so that's where you start to get like, okay, well, why are they killing off dragons if they know they need them? That gets a little Dune-like in its specificity of like how we're trying to control the future. That's where I start to put the brakes on a little bit. But we do know that they are trying to make the prince that was promised Kwisatz Haderach. I mean, they are trying to do that. So now Gray Area is bringing up in the chat one of the other most obvious possibilities is that Alys Rivers is feeding the trees, like we talked about, and that her main agenda is to get all this wonderful Targaryen blood and even dragon blood, because the dragons die in the lake too. Is the agenda mostly about just getting all this sweet magical blood into the weirwood system?
That's probably the most straightforward
Nom,
answer.
nom, nom,
Like,
nom, nom.
if you assume that she is like as she appears, which is a crazy weirwood witchy woman, then feeding the weirwoods is something that is pretty straightforward that she would do. And like, yeah, it doesn't have to have like any grand time manipulation aspect to it. If it's just she sees certain things and she knows that her trees that show her those things would like some blood, and she will do what she can to help with that.
So I wore my queen shirt, my green queen, in honor of
Nice.
Alys Rivers. I could have worn my Nana Vagar shirt. Nana Vagar does have some tasty blood, gray area. That is true. That is some priceless, rich blood there. I have to.
Yeah.
That is probably the most logical thing. So I guess what we're trying to figure out is how much of Alice's agenda is short term versus like the grand conspiracy
Yeah.
of the prince that was promised. She comes across more as the former because she does end up
Yeah.
ruling as the witch queen of Harrenhal. Like after Damon and Aemon die, she conveniently is left in charge of Harrenhal and may be in charge of Harrenhal for as long as almost 20 years. We don't know, of course, the end of her story. So it's one of those, well, it's kind of convenient. It worked out that way for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, maybe she essentially she's feeding the weirwood system all this powerful blood. Then she's able to use that weirwood system for magic. And it sort of parallels the idea that she has Aemon's baby in her belly, who could be Damon's baby. I've heard people speculate. In Fire and Blood, it says that her and Damon, nothing is recorded of their interactions, so they assume he resisted her charms. But that's very much like, well, we didn't hear anything, so who knows? It's just a big blank.
That's
It's
a
mostly
funny
obvious.
assumption. It's a funny assumption for like the one time that they're like, Damon probably didn't sleep with that one. It's like seems like the assumption for Damon would be that he did. If you didn't hear, assume he slept with them. But maybe that's just me.
So we'll have to see what the show does. It is more magical
Yeah.
tension than sexual tension, but who knows how that could go.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so the idea of her having one of these, a dragon baby in her belly, is sort of parallel to where, like, thank you very much. I'll take your seed and soul and magical blood and then cast you off, praying mantis like, and then use this child for some sort of political or magical gain. Okay, so
Yeah.
there is an entire, I don't know if I want to get into all of this. There is an entire mythical astronomy, Azor Ahai, Nissa Nissa parallelism reading of this whole story. We've already talked about a little bit of it. The key of it is Damon as the last hero, Aemon as the Night's King, and Alys as Night's Queen. Nettles is playing the original Nissa Nissa role. Okay, so.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that Nettles is a child of the forest, just because I think Nissa Nissa was. All of the people who play Nissa Nissa roles have symbolic child of the forest clues. They're not all children of the forest. So Dany, for example, she is a child, and she's wandering around a green sea made of plants.
Yeah. Yep.
Catelyn and Cersei are both cat women. Cersei's a lioness. Catelyn is cat. Sansa has cat's eyes, which is a great one because literally it's the cat eyes of the children of the forest that is the clue that we're riffing off of here. So there's a whole. Anyways, it doesn't mean that Nettles is a child of the forest, but it could. If she was, it would work very nicely. And so for Alys, as a Night's Queen figure, look at what she's doing with Aemond. She, Night's King gave his seed and soul to Night's Queen. And Aemond basically does the same thing. He gives her his seed and pretty much his soul. She is treated as his queen. He does what she instructs him with her visions. So her child, who does get born, and we do see as a young boy, he represents the others. Okay, because the children of Knights, King, and Queen are the others. And so that child potentially is a very important magical child. I don't know what she did with that kid or where she went or who they became, but like this is all following the pattern of the creation of the others. So I have to think that that child is significant and his creation is significant, and that Alys is basically doing this all with magic in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to ask, because that was one of the things that I didn't know, is like what happens to that kid, but it sounds like we just kind of don't know, fades from the history.
And yes, Gray, that's right. They also say that she has a dragon. So she could be using a glamour. It's the guy. So what it is, it's the dude who gets choked when he runs back and gives, oh, she said this and don't come near it and blah, blah, blah. And then the last thing he says, and she had a dragon. I saw it. And that's what causes somebody to laugh. And that's when he's strangled.
Okay.
So I talked about this in my Harrenhal video, and I said, well, it is possible because Aemond has access to dragon's eggs. And if he is treating her as his queen and he is having a child with her, then absolutely he could have left a dragon's egg with her. And that could have hatched. And so it's very possible that she has a little dragon hatchling and Aemond's kid there at Harrenhal. That is possible. It is also possible that that is some sort of illusion. Obviously, Alys Rivers seems like she's capable of using illusion magic. But yes, where did all these things go?
Yeah, that like to me that was the biggest question. Like going like in prep for this stream, just kind of refreshing myself on Alys Rivers stuff. I was just sitting there like, okay, all of this feels pretty important, and it's sort of just like Nettles, where it's just like, and then she just flew off into the sunset. We don't know what happened, and there's like little hints where Nettles might have been, but I don't know if we have any hints of Alys Rivers. Where if Alys Rivers is like a child of the forest, in a glamour, it would make sense that she would just go back to High Heart or the caves, the tree towns, wherever they meet up for the children who aren't all north of the wall. But like you'd think her kid would have been significant enough to even just be like, oh, and he was killed when Harrenhal was retaken, or he was last seen doing whatever, but I don't know if we get any of that.
I feel like the dragon can't really grow up because then it has to be seen.
Yeah. That too, yeah, that's a weird one. Like I had missed that she was rumored to have a dragon, but you're right. Like it has to not become super significant anywhere.
It could be killed when it's young, because again, we don't know how Alys is taken down. We don't know what becomes of the child. It could be that the dragon is, we can't rule out the darkest possibilities. Alys sacrificing the dragon to do blood magic, or even the child.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking about that with the dragon too. The child does make sense too, but like, yeah, if she's super old Godsey, and maybe like, you'd assume her kid would be able to ride the dragon, but maybe if she couldn't ride the dragon, she's just like, well, the most use I can get out of this is another magical blood sacrifice to this tree that does give me power. But yeah, that could definitely be the case. I don't know.
And Gray, we were talking about the Ghost of High Heart earlier. We were saying, is Alys, does she become the Ghost of High Heart? Or are they just like frenemies on, hills? Do they meet at the Woods Witch confab every 10 years?
They play bingo together on Saturdays.
Gray's saying, what if the child was a girl? Because it's a very young kid, so who knows?
That's true too, yeah.
Maybe that kid
another
is the
Woods
Ghost
Witch later. Yeah, I was just thinking, another Woods Witch later on in the story somewhere would make sense then. I
really do like the idea that Alys was the three-eyed crow before Damon. Look what you're doing to me, Gray Area. Look what you're doing to me. You're in my head. Yeah. Get out of my mind. No. Before Bloodraven. But I just like the idea. I don't. There's not enough evidence to feel certain about it. There's enough evidence to say it's a good, plausible idea. Because she's at Harrenhal doing magic. That means she could be a Greenseer. So right there.
Yeah.
But
I have a lot of those where it's like there are hints. I don't know if you would call it evidence necessarily, but there's not evidence. Like there's nothing that rules it out, and there's a few things that make it kind of cool. So
And it's like if she's not the three-eyed crow and she's not the ghost of High Heart, then we need a story where she dies. But that's not as interesting, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
So gray area, look, if you have not seen Michael Talks About Stuff video about old Nan being a child of the forest, you have got to watch it. You will die. You will die. He thinks that Nettles and old Nan are the same child of the forest and connects that.
Or besties. Yeah.
What's that?
Or besties. Or besties. I left the door open to they could also be magical besties.
No, you said Nettles Nan. You started calling her Nettles Nan, and that.
Oh, I did. I threw in the caveat of like it could be besties, but we're gonna go forward as though they're the same person. But I kept the qualification open that they could both just know each other.
And I will just say, not to spoil too much of your video, but you did point out that if old Nan is Nettles, that means old Nan has ridden a dragon, and maybe that's why she can smell the comet and go, it means dragon's boy. And where's Sheep Stealer?
She knows what they smell like. Yeah. Yep. She knows what dragons smell like. There's a lot of things that line up in a very cool way, and I don't know if I just completely pulled them like off of different shelves and I'm like, here you go, or if this is something that George has put together on his own, like for a reason. But
so getting back to the Alys Rivers Night's Queen thing, Alys is the Night's Queen name. So I wrote it down here. Alys Karstark is Winter's lady when she marries Magnar of Then. She's got a icy crown and all. It's a Night's Queen as Night's Queen can be. That's Alys Karstark. Alysanne Targaryen has blue eyes instead of purple. She has white hair, white as snow, and goes to the north. She rides a silver dragon, which is ice dragon coated. So that's all ice symbolism. Then we've got Olenna Harlaw, who is corpse-like. That is Asha Greyjoy's and Theon's mother. She's corpse-like, so she's like a corpse queen. She's cold and corpse-like. Then there is Lysa Tully, Night's Queen in an ice palace when we see her at the end of Storm. So Lysa, then Lyanna is a Night's Queen figure, and there's probably more too. But all of those name variants are going to be Night's Queen figures every time. Okay. Oh, Sansa goes by Elaine Stone.
Oh yeah, okay.
So yes, the 13 slashes on the heart tree. That is what I call Last Hero math. I do think that is a reference to the Last Hero's party. He had 12 plus himself, so that's 13 people. Yeah. So Aemond, he is wearing knight's black armor, and he shows up after a fortnight. Okay, so this is the Night Fort clue. Somebody figured out, it wasn't me, one of my Mythhead friends, figured out that basically every time they say Night Fort, fortnight, you should think about the Night Fort. And so, yes, after waiting for a fortnight, here comes Aemond with a blue star eye, like the others, wearing night black armor, chased with gold. So it's like chasing the sun away, is how I interpreted that. And he lands, he's got a Night's Queen. He's riding Vhagar, who's an ice dragon. Vhagar's name comes from the star Vega, which is in the northern sky. 12,000 years ago, it was the pole star, which in Ice and Fire is the eye of the ice dragon. So Vhagar. Okay. And Visenya is a Night's Queen figure as well. She takes Aegon's seed and soul when she cuts him with the sword. Because that is the excuse she uses to create the Kingsguard, who symbolize the others. So she takes her magic sword, she takes Aegon's blood, and then she creates the Kingsguard. So that is the Night's Queen making the others from Azor Ahai's blood. And similarly, Alys Karstark takes the dragon seed of Aemond. Yeah. Okay. And she is symbolically creating the others with her child. And that is another clue about the original Azor Ahai being a dragon person, just as Aemond is a dragon person and Euron is coded as a dragon person.
That's very good about the creating the Kingsguard from the blood of Aegon by slashing his cheek and like the other because I think you're dead on with the others being paralleled to the Kingsguard. So like the creation of the others with the king's blood is like, that's really good.
So Gray Area is trying to help me. So I've made a video about all this, but I think I don't label my videos well. I used to be really bad about this. So it's like symbolism of the others, Kingsguard. That's what I called
Yeah.
that video. And Gray Area is like, you should make a video called Aemond is Night's King. That would be a banger. Yes, that would be a banger. Thank you.
Yeah.
I will run that up the flagpole with management, see how it does.
It is always, especially videos where you cover like three different things. I always don't know, like, am I burying the lead on this title? Like, is this the most click worthy title and thumbnail for what I'm going to be talking about here or not?
I'm slowly getting better at it, but it is hard. Like, people like us, we get so in the theory, and then we make a title like, well, what's it about? And we make a poetic title, and it's like, no, dude. No, you got to hand that one to the marketing department. You have to take off the writing cap and put on the marketing cap.
Yes. I put on my marketing cap for the Weirwood Eating Maester Game of Thrones didn't show you, is how I titled my Marwyn Eats Weirwood Leaves one. I'm just like, okay,
you've
that's
got
a
some
little
good thumbnails for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm getting better at it, and in all seriousness, that is a large part of what me and Maynard James Plum, my YouTube manager, work on is thumbnails and titles, and how to package this stuff, because I have a lot of good ideas.
Yeah.
Once you watch my video, I feel like you're into it, but you got to get people to click on it. And symbolism of the others, Kingsguard, that was not it. That was not the title.
Yeah. It was a good point though, and like I'll just bring this up to you since this was something I was going to talk about in a video at some point, but it's just been on the to-do list. Was a response to your idea that you posed of why are the others mirrored to the Kingsguard so much. And what I think is kind of going on is that they both serve the same function in their system of power. The king is obviously the center of power. If you try to harm the king, the Kingsguard is going to come and attack you. In the old god's magical system of power, the weirwoods are the center of power. And if someone is not feeding enough blood to the weirwoods, if the old ways aren't being followed properly, the wall's ward could stop working, and then the others can come attack you. So it's like, if you come at the king, this is the order that you have to deal with. So I think that's kind of why they're partially mirrored, is because they function in the same role in their particular system of power.
So it says a lot of things. It says that, and it tells you that the Kingsguard the others were formed to protect a royal couple. So that means there is a Night's King. There is a leader of the others. There is a Night's Queen. We haven't seen these characters yet, but the show didn't get the idea of a Night's King out of nowhere. There will be a leader of the others. I think it will be Euron, inhabited by a spirit of the original Night's King that is in the Weirwood Net. Okay? And so this is perfect, actually. So let's think about the Aemond and Damon battle. Like I said, Damon cuts the weirwood tree 13 times. So that gives you the number 13. That's the last hero's party. That's just to show you he is the weirwood associated party. The original last heroes group, his 12 companions died. My theory, I'm sure you know about this, Michael, but in case you are new to the channel, my theory is that those companions died and were resurrected. They were turned into cold handses. And so picture 13 cold handses. They are ideal to range in the north. They don't need to eat or sleep or stay warm. Cold Hands shows you the model. John's going to be a resurrected Night's Watchman. Whether it's ice or fire, it almost doesn't matter. Either way, you don't need to eat or sleep. So when you think about the original Night's Watch, the story of the last hero tells you, like, oh, all his friends died, but then he emerged to lead the Night's Watch against the others. Well, where did the Night's Watch come from? They were resurrected. They were resurrected probably with weirwood magic, and that's why the Night's Watch O's are in front of the weirwoods, and that's why they kneel as green boys and then rise as men, dressed in funeral black like zombies. It's all about resurrection. So Damon cutting the weirwood, it gives you the 13 number, it gives you the Weirwood Association, it gives you Lightbringer. Then we have Night's King and Night's Queen show up on the Ice Dragon after a fortnight, and then they fight over the Weirwood Net. Well, no. They fight over the Isle of Faces and the God's Eye, but that is the Weirwood Net. So it's one of those things like we joked about, we always knew the Night's King was tied to the Weirwoods. Dave and Dan misheard that, and they literally tied him to the Weirwoods.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. They're fighting over the Weirwood Net. They're fighting over the Isle of Faces. Last Hero and Night's King. This is the power they are fighting over. And so
Yeah.
what happens to Night's King? He ends up chained to his dragon, stuck in the bottom of the lake, with Lightbringer shoved through his eyeball. Okay? So, where is the spirit of original Night's King? It is in the lake. It is in, and the other side of the weirwood net is the frozen lake.
In that well at the bottom of the night fort, at the bottom of the tree, stabbed through, stuck to the tree. This style, stabbed
Could
through
be,
with a glass
could
candle.
be. I would vote in the Heart of Winter, but it could be that the Heart of Winter is Winterfell or the Night Fort. It could be that too.
Yeah, I think it
they're
might
all
be,
sort of parallel places. So
yeah, I do agree. I think it might be like either deep below Winterfell or inside the wall itself is the Heart of Winter.
And so basically what I'm saying is that Aemond at the bottom of the lake is a very important symbol. That is dead Azor Ahai. He's in the other side of the weirwood net. That is the Great Other. And Lightbringer, or not Lightbringer, but Dark Sister shoved through his skull that is the moon meteor in the weirwood net. That's the oily black stone. It's the poison element. It is the bad thing that is not supposed to be there. And the name Dark Sister alludes to the second moon, which is the sister moon. It is now dark. It is either gone or hidden. So that's really, it's a great moon meteor symbol, Dark Sister. And it's in the frozen side of the weirwood net. So I think that when we get to when Dany and Jon take their mission to the Heart of Winter and they got to cleanse the weirwood net or whatever, we're going to see black stone. It's going to involve black stone for sure.
Yeah,
I think so. Not for sure. Sorry.
Yeah.
In theory.
Well, no, I get how it goes with the theories. You sound terrible when you're constantly adding the qualifiers every time you talk about theories, right? Like you can't talk about a theory constantly like reminding everyone I think this. So that I do the same thing where I'm just
the perfect balance is to say it with the hyperbole that everyone wants and then circle around for the self-awareness qualifier so people don't think you're like, got your head up your own Casterly Rock. So
exactly. The other thing I was going to bring up too with Aemond, he's obviously got the parallel to Simeon Star Eyes, who is at the Night Fort and has both of his eyes replaced by sapphires, and like it's such a weird story of him because he's blind. Yet the one thing we know about him is that he saw hellhounds fighting at the Night Fort. So he's a Sir from a time before knights existed. He's supposedly blind, and the only thing we know about him is that he saw something, and that thing that he saw is something that we don't know what it means. What are hellhounds in this world? We don't hear them referenced elsewhere.
So I think that the hellhounds is Starks versus others, because the Starks are hellhound coded, being dire wolves, especially with all their underworld Cerberus symbolism, and then the others are also like a wolf pack. They move silently through the woods. They're gaunt. Shadows. Especially, they're described as.
Yeah, if they're related to the Starks in any way, then it is literally like hellhounds fighting hounds.
Also that, the Starks have other blood, exactly. So
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And then so I don't know quite the idea of like why does he have, Star Eye? Who is he? Why did he watch the other? Yeah. I think he's probably a weirwood tree because the idea of spinning the blade around, it makes him a central axis. Okay, it makes him like the world tree and everything's spinning around him. He's got the star eyes. So I think he is the icy, frozen weirwood tree in the Heart of Winter. I'm just putting this together as I talk.
Yeah.
I think that's what he is, essentially. It's a symbol of the frozen world tree. He watches the hellhounds fight. And then the other thing is Simon is like Simon Peter, who's like the first apostle of Christ. So maybe that is... something.
Yeah, that could be something. Yeah, I'm just thinking. So basically, he's the face when the Black Gate is talking. He became the face.
That's one way to say it. I like to call him Grey King just because Grey King's description is like live for 1,000 years, just like But I think it's all just talking about the same thing. I have some Grey King theories. I've made like 10 Grey King videos. I have more Grey King theories that I have not told anybody about. They are hidden in here. So
I got a couple of theories where I'm like, I've got like a few videos to make, and then we can come back and there's just like that there are pieces still missing that I need to find in the build up, but one day I'll get some. I got a few more bangers in there at least.
So a couple of questions lingering here. Where do the Strongs come from? So when we talk about Alys Rivers and is she a Greenseer, the 400 years old thing seems like a TV conceit, but it's clearly suggested that she could be well older than anyone thinks in the books too. And so, where does she come from? Related question is, where do the Strongs come from? They were made the Lords of Harrenhal in like 73 AC, and they're said to be a First Men family. They are clearly from somewhere around the Trident because their sigil has the red, green, and blue of the three branches of the Trident, but it is not said where they come from. I heard someone ask if they are from the Isle of Faces, but no, it's implied that regular people don't go to the Isle of Faces, so you wouldn't have a house that has a castle there coming and going. That doesn't seem right. So
no. Yeah, do we have any clues to go on with the first member of House Strong, or is it
just the
kinda...
Trident colors, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
I tend to think same thing with the Harroways. We're not told where they come from, but I figure they just come from Harroway's town. But there's the Strongs. I don't know, somewhere maybe. The Tullys. I'm more interested in the origin of the Tullys because we have some clues about that. They had an origin before they came to Riverrun, which is hinted at. But the Strongs, I do not know.
It could definitely be George just doing a bit of the thing that he does with House Justman, where it's just like, House Strong, oh yeah, they're extinct. House Justman, yeah, they're extinct. All these, houses that are named after traditional, values, you want to be just, you want to be strong. Yeah, they're all extinct in this world. I don't know if he's doing that or if there's anything deeper, but...
And Massey has a similar symbol. They've got the triquetra with the three colors. And we're told that they are from that area. They are from the Stormlands, essentially. So it's hard to know when something is a symbolism or if it's meant to tell you something literally about the house. Okay, so Gray's mentioning Alys Rivers talking about seeing the future in a storm cloud, in a mountain pool, and in the campfire. I was wondering about that line. Does the mountain pool imply that they are visiting the mountains of the moon? Because that's kind of real close by there. And Gray's saying, is the mountain pool the God's Eye Lake itself? And maybe the better question there is just if we can use water as a scrying thing, wouldn't the God's Eye Lake be the ultimate? It's called the Eye. I mean, wouldn't that be the ultimate scrying tool?
That would make sense, actually. And there is the different branches of magic that seem to have similar means, similar powers at the end of the day. So if you can look into fire, maybe you can look into water.
What if it's Aemond and her flying on the dragon way above the lake, and she's looking down at the lake and catching visions in the surface of the lake from hundreds of feet in the sky? There you go, Gray. There's your new tinfoil.
That could work. Yeah.
There you go. It could work. It's like a damn mirror.
It just that description does, now that I'm hearing it again, really just kind of does sound like it's driving home that she follows different magical branches, because the storm god could send visions in a storm. The water magic that we see in Essos, maybe you can get visions from water. There's fire magic. So yeah, it definitely sounds just like multi-branch wide magical ability is what's implied there.
The Roinar definitely have water magic. Yes, they do. And so do them damn squishers, if you ask me. So it does seem like there are, even though George isn't focusing on water magic and aeromancy and stuff, they are out there. And then, so another thing I wanted to bring up is the parallels. So Aemond is marrying Alys Rivers. Several parallels. So Maegor, another Targaryen, who also commits massacres at Harrenhal, marries Alys Harroway, a lady of Harrenhal, who might be a little witchy herself, since Alys Harroway and Maegor went over to Essos and probably started having three-ways with Tyenna of the Tower. So one assumes Alys is on board for that. Then we have Aegon the Unworthy, another Targaryen. He married Felaena Stokeworth. I put Stokeworth Lawston because her husband's Lucas Lawston, but she's another lady of Harrenhal marrying a Targaryen. Then Mad Danelle Lawston. Grey Waste Tim thinks there is a Bloodraven Danelle Lawston connection. If you haven't watched Tim's video about that, you'd probably really enjoy that. She shows up with Bloodraven at the end of the last Dunk and Egg book, but he's wondering if maybe she isn't the mother of Melisandre.
Okay.
So
yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know where I fall on Melisandre. I kind of think she's older than like I think she might have been born in before the Doom even, like but I've never dove super deep into a theory on like she is the child of so and so that's convinced me. But I'll have to check that out.
It's Radio Westeros has an old theory that she is Shiera Seastar and Bloodraven's child, because Shiera Seastar gets the heart-shaped face description that Melisandre also gets, and obviously is tied to lots of sorcery. That's a great theory. I love that theory, and want that to be the case. But Tim made a good case for this one too, so that was pretty entertaining as well. Kind of like with Quaithe. She could be Shiera Seastar, or she could be Alyssa Farman, and both are delightful.
Yeah, there's a lot of theories like that where it's just like any of these could be cool if approached correctly, and I'm down for all of them. With Melisandre being the child of someone, I always just have a hard time connecting it with the whole Melanie Lot 7 thing of like, okay. This obviously isn't a reason to disbelieve the theory, but it's like if she is the child of Shiera Seastar, or if she is, whoever, how did she end up with those memories of being sold at Lot 7?
Well, Shiera Seastar disappears.
Right, yeah.
And so what happened to her? Maybe her story got sad. Maybe she fell on hard times.
Yeah, no, that could definitely be possible for sure.
Maybe she had to part with her child for some sort of reason about keeping it safe and keeping everyone's secret, and then that just didn't go well. She got sold to the Red Temple. Maybe that was a prophetic vision that she had. It was like, oh, this is what I have to do so you can be who you have to be.
That tracks really well, actually, considering the role that Melisandre seems to be playing in the whole Song of Ice and Fire, like, end times prophesied, events. You assume she's got a role in that. So if she is a Targaryen descendant that way, it would make sense that Shiera Seastar would like see that, yeah, this child has to go to the Red Temple.
And there is also the Hardhome theory. I forget the details of that one. The gray area, that is her preferred theory, that Melisandre was taken from Hardhome and sold to slavery. I need to watch a video on that one. I forgot. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've heard that theory brought up, but yeah, I don't know all the details either, but I've heard that one, and I thought it was interesting. But
I'm going to make a Hardhome video after the season, mostly thinking about the geothermal potential stuff there, but I'll probably end up covering every angle. So I will check out that video of yours, Gray. And then the last parallel is Harwin Strong and Rhaenyra. So the genders are swapped, but it's still a Targaryen and a Harrenhal person. So we've got these 4 pairings plus Aemond and Alys, or Aemond and Damon if you want to suspect that. So yeah, it's kind of interesting that we have this repeated pairing of all these Harrenhal women. And I think the reason why is because Harrenhal is a Night Fort stand-in, and all these women are Night's Queens, and all these Dragon Kings are Night's Kings. And so it's just showing us that pairing over and over and over. A Dragon Lord Night's King, a witchy Night's Queen. The one that sticks out is Danelle Lawston. Of course, we don't know if she actually is a part of this pattern because she may or may not have been with Bloodraven. She would not be an icy-coated person. She, obviously, with red hair and her black and red coloring, would be a fire-coated person, so that she would be more of a Nissa type. But like I said, many characters switch from one to the other. And if Melisandre becomes Hands of White Fire Lady for Euron, she might have a switch coming too. Yeah.
That'd be pretty crazy. I haven't really thought about those two teaming up, but I think Westeros should hope that Melisandre never ends up on Euron's side.
Yeah, that would be a bad combination. I think it is not I think that is Night's Queen. I think that is Euron's spirit girlfriend. I think that is Night's Queen in that vision. But
Yeah.
it's almost too exciting to be true.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Laurie's. We didn't bring, thank you, Gray. We didn't bring up Laurie's. So look, similarly, like, again, old man shakes fist at clouds. I'm not a fan of the idea that Laurie's is a Greenseer. But whether or not he is, I do acknowledge that it is a credible theory. He has secret information. I think he's just a really good rumor monger, but maybe the rats, maybe he's spying through it's a coherent theory, right? He gathers information, spies out of the rats. That's how he knows he's a rat. Okay. So whether or not Laurie's is a Greenseer or not, is he working with Alys? Because one of the big questions about Laurie's has always been, what's his agenda? He doesn't have kids, and he's sitting there giving speeches about how kids are a weakness and it's better to make your life, you wait your life without kids. Well, great, okay, but everyone in this story is concerned with legacy and passing on Laurie's. So what is Laurie's working for? He's not even making himself rich. He's just collecting political power. To what ends? Is he working with Alys? Do they have a common agenda?
I was just gonna say he's only on the grind for the feet picks, and that's just the entirety of his goal. But if it's anything beyond feet picks, yeah, it has to be something pretty magically powerful. Because yeah, I don't know.
And it could be a shared political goal or a shared magical
Right,
goal. Either one.
right. He could also. I mean, yeah, he could take some amount of power from the weirwood, and then therefore think like, ah, yes, I am able to tap into this power. And that, he does, you could argue, make a blood sacrifice to the weirwood tree when he kills his father and his brother. So maybe Alys would have been in on that. That seems like a pretty majorly powerful magical blood sacrifice. Um, I don't know. I don't really know if uh if he is working with her and she can see the future, that would imply that he is a tool. Yeah, he's being manipulated on some level or another, probably, right? Because like it's not like he ends up in an incredibly powerful end game situation for himself, as far as I'm aware, right? Like he doesn't win in the end, whereas she gets to rule Harrenhal for a while after the dance, at the very least. Who knows where she ends up, with her child or with her magical goals. Um, you're muted.
Good. Now you are officially a David Lightbringer channel guest. You have reminded me that I am muted. That is
Yeah.
the initiation. So, Laurie's, Gray's mentioning the Helena connection. They are both. So Helena likes bugs, but she in particular is weaving spiders. And we know that
Okay.
Laurie's is a spider figure. He also refers to Mysaria as a spider figure. So spider is a flexible term. It refers to anyone who has a web that they
Yeah.
are at the head of, right?
Yep.
Let's see, where was I going with that?
The Helena connection
Helena.
with Laris.
So he's taking an interest in Helena. I definitely think it's possible that Laurie's arranged, not arranged, but arranged for there not to be guards when Blood and Cheese happened.
Yeah.
It could be that is the reason why that hallway is so conspicuously empty, and they're having Helena run around. There's just nobody anywhere. It's like, that's either
Yeah.
really sloppy directing or that's conspicuous. We're supposed to notice. So could Laurie's have an agenda? If the agenda is magical between Laurie's and Alys, if the agenda is just sacrifice all these Targaryens, drink their blood, okay, Helena jumps into the spiked moat at King's Landing. Is Laurie's trying to, right, does Laurie's kill her? Does he drive her to it? Does he does he collect the magic out of that? What's going on there?
Yeah, that's interesting. If the old godsy magical powers behind Harrenhal are bloodthirsty for Targaryen blood, that his actions have certainly led to plenty of it. So I don't know. I don't know if we have anything strongly to say that he's magically motivated yet. But this is kind of a thing that I've thought about recently with Varys and Illyrio too. Is it's like, if you're a spy master in a world where magic exists, it would make you terrible at your job if you don't look into how magic works. Like you're almost required to look into this because it is a force that works in your world. So just by being the Master of Whispers, I kind of feel like he almost has to know about magic now. So yeah, maybe he does have more details than he would let on.
I wonder if he also sees Helena as a threat because she's not controllable, because she has this information source and she doesn't behave like everyone else and isn't manipulatable.
Yeah, yeah.
So a theory of Ice and Fire is, so first of all, yes, on the show they say Laris, which I don't like. I say Lares. Yeah. The reason why I say Lares is because I've been saying Varys and Daenerys and Ares since the beginning, because it's just never made sense to me to say Daenerys or Varys or, worst of all, Anus.
Yeah.
That's the worst. Anis becomes Anus. Instead of being the bee's knees like Anis or Achilles, it becomes an anus.
Yeah.
Now, George does say Daenerys. George says Daenerys.
Yeah.
And on the show they say Laris. George also says you can say it however the F you want. So I say Lares kind of on I haven't changed myself because I just like it better and because I've always said Varys that way. However, somebody in the chat, Theory of Ice and Fire, is pointing out that Lariz, Lariz, is Spanish for living next to an oak wood.
Okay, a little bit of a tangent, but pretty related. Did you catch what was on the back of the chair at Harrenhal?
It was like a Green Man face, right?
Yeah, it was a guy sitting on what looked like a Green Man throne. Which is very interesting for that to be at Harrenhal, and it's ruined. It's like an old ruined chair, which kind of implies it may have been from the time of Harren himself, or at the very least, it's also fallen into disrepair. But like, if Harren was putting green men in their tree thrones on the back of his like dining hall chairs, and was building next to the Isle of Faces, that definitely also implies some like green man knowledge on Harren's part.
Or that could be from the Strongs, or it could be from, again, if there's a faction of people that live there that I've always worshipped the old gods, you know, they could be the ones carving the chairs and putting that mythology back in. That's what happens. When you conquer a people, their mythology is never fully conquered. It always leaks out the sides, if you will.
Right.
But yeah, they could be building this. We'll have to see. We'll just have to see how they're building it up on the show. Because remember, there are two canons that we're sort of talking about here at once.
Right.
There's a lot of crossover between the book and show canon, but in some cases they just zag, like with Dany's eggs being from Syrax. That's just totally different.
Yeah.
Rhaena who? Alyssa who? I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Also, it would set up, like, if we do get to see the Isle of Faces, and there are green men strapped into oaken or weirwood thrones, like, that is exactly what we saw on the back of the chair, so, like, maybe it is, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, it's a setup for the fact that we're eventually going to the Isle of Faces, and we may see a green men throne there. So if we do see that, then it's been set up, and the audience will be able to look back at that and be like, "Oh, there it is. There's the tree throne. We saw it in Harrenhal."
Yeah, I can't even think about things that exciting, Michael.
I know. Oh, I know.
I started having flashbacks to the spirals from Game of Thrones.
I know. We've been like so long since we've gotten like in-depth look at lore like that, where it's like we all thought we were going to get it in the late seasons of Game of Thrones with the spirals and everything, and we just never got it. So now it's hard to think about the fact that House of the Dragon might give it to us and not get like too excited and not feel like you're working yourself up over nothing because it might not come. But I have faith again. My faith is restored that we're going to get to see. Oh God. We're going to get to see Weirwood Thrones. One
more bit about the Lares Greenseer rat theory. I never thought if you're a rat, you see a lot of feet.
Oh,
Oh
yep. All
God,
right, it's confirmed.
I'm
It's
sick.
confirmed.
I'm
He's
sick.
that's where that's
I'm
where he
sick.
spends his days.
Yeah, with Laurie's Greenseers, I guess I'm to the point where I'm like, if they want to show it to us, it'll make sense. Um, I just
Yeah.
don't see a need for it. Like, there's rumor mongers all the time that aren't Greenseers. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
We'll have to see if they show it to us. They've definitely set it up if they want to.
Yeah. It
Oh God, the rats
yeah.
see the feet. Oh, it's.
There, someone brings up the theory of ice and fire, bringing up the rat chewing on Theon's foot is Larry's consciousness. Because if you go into the rats, that means Larry's is still bouncing around in a
He's
rat
in
to this
RatNet.
day.
All the rats in
Yeah,
King's Landing have just Larry's. He's the only rat skin changer ever, so it's just him copied
yeah,
over.
yeah. He's omni
I'm dead.
rat.
I'm dead. So, Gray, we were a minute ago. You were asking about Herod. We had a nice little section earlier where Michael was cooking pretty hard, and we were speculating about Heron essentially trying to recreate what the first men did with building a castle around a weirwood and creating a magical ward, with his mortaring the stones with blood, using weirwoods for rafters and beams, but then still keeping a godswood. That's always, I've been stuck on that. Why didn't he cut down that weirwood too? Why did he keep a godswood if he cut down all these other weirwoods? Well, it's because he was trying to use their magic in sort of in a Euron kind of way, if you will. Not like, oh, I'm a Greenseer, I will be in harmony with the trees, but like, I'm going to rape this magical system and reuse it the way I want to. But the point is essentially, yeah, the Heron may have been more of a sorcerer than we realize, and he was doing all this on purpose. And building, I can't believe we haven't talked about this. Hinge of the world. Is the God's Eye hinge of the world? Almost certainly, right?
Yeah, probably. Like it makes sense that way. I don't see how
Could it
it
not
could
be?
be elsewise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. Like what the fallout of that will be, I don't know. But like, yeah, I'd say the Night Fort, Ashai, the God's Eye, definitely. I don't know if there's others. The five forts maybe are built on top of something we don't know about, but yeah. Yep.
Theory of Ice and Fire is pointing out that the Rat King, the Rat Cook, is a kinslayer. Laurie's
Yeah.
is a kinslayer.
That's true. Oh yeah, that is another Night Fort parallel with the whole kinslaying for potentially magical purposes.
Well, cool. Like I said, everybody's a damn green seer. I lose. Everyone is a green seer. I admit defeat. Um, well, we'll see. There's again the question of what the show does and what the books do. But we don't have much detail. Really, Fire and Blood is not really a lot of detail. So it's kind of fun to get all this detail here. Okay, the glass candle. We haven't talked about that either. First of all, Alys Rivers could be using, if she's got a glass candle, then that would, we know that can be used for dream implantation and, messing with people's dreams.
Yep.
So Harrenhal, the melted castle, is described as looking like candles, candle wax melting down the sides. So is that a clue that Black Heron had a glass candle, or that there are glass candles involved at Harrenhal? I don't see that Black Heron would, because it's a Valyrian thing, and he is not connected to the Valyrians and is put down by a Valyrian. But I am more curious about potentially Alys using one. I think Aegon definitely had one on Dragonstone. I don't know if there's one at Harrenhal. What do you think?
It'd be interesting. I do like the idea of the towers burning the way that they did, kind of looking similar to a glass candle, if nothing else. It really depends, I think, like, because originally George had intended for like all the maesters to have glass candles. So he kind of used to, in his mind, I think, have them in a lot more places.
I think it could be. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was
No,
just
I was
saying it
just
could be
saying.
implying that it's functioning like that, like Gray's saying, like that Harrenhal is being used for psychic sight, either the weirwoods there
Yeah.
or the castle, which is now itself magical. Because Gray, we were talking about the idea that like, okay, can stones store blood power, the mana of the blood magic? We said yes, probably so.
Yep.
Because of the Bloodstone Emperor's meteor, because of the Dawn meteor, because of the wards that are set in castles that seem to be anchored in stones. It seems like stones can be used to tie to, and then glamours as well. So, mortaring Harrenhal's stones with blood imbues them with magic. Dragonfire also is magical because of Valerian steel. Dragonfire seems to imbue Valerian steel with a magical quality. And so, it seems like Harrenhal has accidentally been turned into a type of talisman on its own. It has the blood power and it has dragonfire power. So Aegon maybe have turned it into a candle in a sense. Anita, that's kind of what I'm saying. It's kind of what I'm saying is that the castle itself, the stone structure, could be something that people like Alys Rivers and Danelle Lawston are using as a magical device, as a talisman, the entire thing. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And in terms of if there's an actual glass candle there or not, I don't know, but I do kind of get the vibe that the weirwoods seem to be able to do the same thing as glass candles in a lot of cases. Like it might be the case that like they have just the same powers on ice and fire side. Like the weirwoods can send dreams, and if you're bound to the weirwood, you can live forever as long as it's renewed with blood. The glass candles can send dreams, and it's basically the same thing. If you're bound to it on the fire side, it would be similar.
So let's think about the wall. The wall is a hinge of the world. It's implied that I think it's implied that it's a magical hotspot inherently because
Yeah.
the Night Fort is built around that weirwood organism, which seems to be magical and unique. And the wall's location is determined by the Night Fort, if that's the order. But then the fact that the wall itself is a magical structure seems to add on to the power of the hinge. And this seems to be the same with Harrenhal. The Isle of Faces is already a magical place, but then we made a castle and we imbued magic and we did blood sacrifice and then we smoked it with dragonfire and all of that stuff. And yeah, all the people that have died there, the weirwoods that were burned that had souls inside of them, all of that stuff is adding to this thing, this hinge of the worldness to the castle. So at a certain point, it becomes a very powerful talisman on its own, and it is being reclaimed by these weirwoods. So I think I think it makes a very good comparison to the wall because it's a natural thing that's then been worked on and added to. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say it sort of is making me think of like resonance. Like you have this magical power there, and then you build a structure that resonates with it, and it makes all of it just the more powerful because they feed off of one another. And that's kind of the vibe I got when you were talking about how like, yeah, there's the natural magic of the location of the wall. That was probably the reason the wall was built where it was. And then if you build a magical sacrifice on top of it, that constantly creates a feedback loop to power that magic stronger. And it all builds into the old ways system that we see now, essentially.
So I have just dropped a link in the video. That is Gray Area's video from today. That is the new video. So go check that one out. And thanks very much for dropping by, Gray. That was a nice addition to the stream. Sent us on a couple of fun tangents there. Not tangents, but, courses of discussion.
Topics, yeah.
Lines of dialogue. And, Cleo has just expired. Yes, it must be that time. Well, it has been about 3 hours, Michael, and I should probably give you back to your day and life. So thank you very much for coming on the channel. This has been everything I hoped it would be. We can do a closing thoughts here, but yeah, let's definitely think about wrapping this up. And if you have any last questions, chat, you can go ahead and throw them at us. But I think we've covered most of what I wanted to cover.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It was a lot of fun. We got to cover the topic we set out and a few things I think we knew we had to talk about and would get off topic and talk about some Night 40 stuff, some old godsy stuff. So that was fun.
And then
Um,
here's the link to Michael's channel. It's Michael Talks About Stuff. Always name your YouTube
yeah,
channel after the same handle you use on social media, but there's the link.
yeah,
It is linked in the description as well. So yeah, Gray Area. I think Gray Area is just finding your channel possibly. Correct me
okay.
if I'm wrong, but I think that is what's happening here. So yeah, definitely check
Yeah,
out that
that'd be
old
fun.
Nant video, Craig. You're gonna love
Yeah,
that one.
yeah. I always love seeing people's reaction to that one when they've watched it recently.
And then after the season's over, why don't we do the second half of this on your channel and we can really get into the Night
Okay.
Fort maybe and drill into your
Yeah.
theories about the North and chop it up there because we only I've got a lot of Night Fort stuff. We're done today.
Yeah.
We can't get to it, but
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I'm absolutely down to come back whenever we can have many more of these chats, I'm sure, so people can have their questions lined up for next time we do one of these. So
yeah, the Discord was excited as soon as I dropped the news this morning. I was like,
okay,
yeah,
yeah.
don't miss this one, guys. So yeah, this has
Yeah,
been great.
we've
And
only been teasing it for months. We've only been teasing this since like, end of winter or whatever, whenever it was when we first
well,
started
in true ADHD
dropping.
fashion, I just thought of this yesterday and messaged you. It was like, hey, can you come on
Yep.
tomorrow?
Yep, and same with me. I'm just like, yeah, perfect. I don't have to think too far ahead. I don't have to like make a plan like 3 months out, or 2 weeks out, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's it.
Absolutely, I can come on tomorrow and chat about Harrenhal. Why not?
And then, of course, yeah, after the season, perhaps Gray and I can find some time to collab and talk about some stuff. We've been meaning to do that for a long time. We were going to collab and talk about the Pact of Ice and Fire months ago because both of us are very into the idea that this prophecy is something the Starks and Targaryens have talked about several times, Cregan and
Yep.
Torrhen and all this stuff. And then I think we're both a little bit let down by the lack of Pact of Ice and Fireness on the show,
Yeah.
but we're hoping that it'll come back up. So maybe after the
Yeah.
season, we see what they do with Krieg and we can get together and talk about that or something.
Yeah, I was gonna say I hope they're coming back to Cregan. I would understand why pacing wise they didn't do it before all the funeral stuff because it was like a big reaction to the end of last season. I could see them changing it around for pacing purposes that Cregan and Jace will have more, or Cregan will do more of that sort of stuff later. But yeah, if we don't get any more like Stark lore drops and theory confirmation or like theory clues, I will be pretty sad.
It would seem curious as much as they've played at the
Yeah,
prophecy. So we will give them
right.
time
Yeah,
to come around to that. But yeah, we'll see after the season. We'll see what they do with that, and then maybe me and Gray will get together and chop it up. So lastly, Michael, hair care tip. Chat wants to know.
stop getting haircuts and then condition it every once in a while, and mostly water washes. Full wash every now and then, but conditioner, once twice a week, and then yeah, that's all I got.
It's the number one tip that people with good hair always don't wash it too much. Don't over.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
yeah. Water
Stop
washes
cutting your
most of
hair
the
though.
time.
That's the other tip.
That's the biggest one. Yeah, you have an awkward phase in the middle there where it doesn't look as great, and then eventually it's everywhere, and then you're fine.
That's
That's
what
my
happened to me. Is I
experience at
got to
least.
this point where it was all in my mouth and stuff, and I'm trying to take bong hits, and I was just like, I can't.
The problem is when it's not long enough to get in the ponytail yet, so it's just everywhere, and then yeah, once you get through that phase, you can get it in the ponytail, and then you just throw it all back every time you're eating or doing whatever. But yeah, it is also weird. Like once it gets long enough, every time you have a hair in your mouth, instead of having to get it out of your mouth, you just go like this because it's from your head. It's still
Yeah.
connected to your head, so you just do this, and it'll pull the hair out. Pretty much every time.
Yeah.
But other than
Yep.
that, I don't have too many tips. Those are the main observations I've had since I grew my hair out.
Yeah. And then are you Benjen or Neil Peart? Can you settle that?
I probably more comparisons to Westeros than to musicians. That's probably what's more in the mind as I grew my own hair out.
Oh no, we're gonna find out.
You gonna do a poll? There we go.
We are.
Okay.
We're gonna do a poll. I forgot about polls completely, so we'll do one.
Yeah, why not? While we give people time to vote, I was gonna ask you this too, because this is something that will be my video tomorrow if I get it edited. If I'm happy with the recording and get it edited tonight before bed, which was my plan. I'm going to talk about how secret of a location the Black Gate is. And like the more I think about it, I don't think anyone knows about the Black Gate. I don't think any of the wildlings know about it. I don't think the Night's Watch know about it at all. And Old Nan doesn't tell Bran about it. So I kind of
Bloodraven is like the only one who might know.
Bloodraven is the only one, and one of the things that this made me think of is like, if the Black Gate was visible the way it is now when the Night Fort was still manned, you would think people would know about it. But I wonder if the Black Gate wasn't like covered in stone at some point, like in the ancient past, maybe when the Night's King was defeated, they built the stone around it. And Bloodraven at some point literally went there and uncovered it, and that's why the Night's Watch has forgotten about it, because it's a little bit weird that there'd be a way through the wall that the Night's Watch knows about, or doesn't know about, but it uses their oath. And all of the old gates were sealed with stone and ice. So, like, maybe they sealed that thing in with stone, forgot about it, and Bloodraven like had to go and uncover it so that Cold Hands would have like a secret.
Well, so we could send that pregnant Mama Direwolf through the wall.
Exactly.
To go
and then
die
that's the
next
other
to
thing.
Winterfell. Yeah.
That's the other thing that there's the logical fallout of Bloodraven uncovering it is it's like, oh, Cold Hands probably like just the same way he scooped up Sam after they were attacked by the others, he probably scooped up the guy from the prologue, brought him to the Black Gate the same way he did with Sam, made him say the words and take the wolf with him.
Oh, right. Yeah. How did he get the wall?
Yeah. That probably was Cold Hands doing the same thing he did with Sam, except for he made him take the wolf. And that's why he and the wolf showed up around Winterfell at the same time. And I very much love the idea of, like, Ned Stark talking to him when Ned said he was talking nonsense or however he phrased it. The guy's just like, so we were attacked by shadows. It was really cold. There was a guy who was dead who was riding an elk, and he made me get on the back of his elk. And then he made me say the Night's Watch vow to this talking face.
There was this face.
It's
like not a regular weird face. No, it's underground, and it moved and it opened up, and then I went in it, and it's like, okay, yeah, cut this guy's head off.
Yeah, exactly. He's just like, bring me ice. This guy is completely out of it. He's insane. He's talking nonsense, and it's just like everything he's describing would just be like really great for them to know. If Ned had just listened to what he was saying, all of this would have been nice information to have.
He's like, I'm going to tell you a story, but you can't laugh. He's like, laugh, I'm going to cut your bloody head off.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, that's a good place to leave it then.
Yeah.
I would say that Neil Peart is winning this poll because this is an ice and fire community. Most of the people, everybody here knows Benjen. Probably only 32% of the crowd knows Neil Peart, and all of that 32% has voted for Neil Peart. So
I'm gonna need the chat to spam Benjen to get that to 69 before David hits end poll. If we can get to 69% Benjen, I'd take that as a win. But I don't know if they're gonna listen to me.
Can Benjen play drums?
We haven't seen him try, so we can't rule it out.
Favorite Benjen Stark Rush song, Closer to the Heart. Tree.
There you go. We overshot the 69. Oh, well.
70. All right, that's fine.
That's close enough.
There you go. Cool. Well, thank you, Benjen Stark, a.k.a. Michael Talks About Stuff. And, let's do it again sometime. You've been a fantastic guest. This has been a very fun session. Hope you had a good time, too.
Yeah, it was great being able to come on a show that I've watched for many years now. So it's one of those weird, cool experiences. But thank you very much. And happy to do it again anytime.
Right on. And then once again, the link to his channel is in the description below, or just type in Michael Talks About Stuff. And we will see you Sunday night for the aftermath. And I'll have Nettles is gone. And so Heidi from Costume Co. will be with us on Sunday. So she is great, and we'll see.
Good costume analysis coming. Some good outfit planning.
And because she's good at costumes, she has a good eye for symbolism and themes and stuff too. So she's kind of a gold mine. She always adds some stuff that I did not see.
Yeah, yeah. Cool.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, guys. See you next time. Thank you. Cheers.